And yeah, so we are live on YouTube. So Sheldon, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Okay, yeah, it's definitely good to see you and talk with you. Um, yeah, I mean, I was wondering for you, if you had a sense of what we could talk about, and you brought up that we should focus on Mr. Michael Jackson, and his sort of legacy. What I mean, what are the things that you've thought about with Mike?
There are a lot of things about Michael Jackson that have already been said as far as his accolades and whatnot. But sometimes I think that the record sales and the media stuff kind of takes precedence over other things that are just as valuable. Of course, we know the record sales, the Thriller situation, and just his gifts. But in terms of what his legacy is to music, specifically black music in particular, these are things that are necessarily not spoken about as much, or it's not put in the proper perspective. I was watching one platform, and I was watching Tank, and he was basically breaking down some of the artists in R&B, and he actually said, quote unquote, that Chris Brown was better than Michael Jackson.
Okay.
you know, and that really threw me for a loop, because when he was describing it, he was describing it, I guess, in a way of Chris Brown's his entertainment value in terms of being able to dance and the hits that he has, and for a lot of people within a certain age group time frame, it could be, Chris Brown could be their Michael Jackson, but Tank is born somewhere like in the mid 70s. So you are coming of age at a period of time when Michael Jackson is doing his thing. But then I started to do the math, because you always got to do the math. He's born in 75. So that means that you're 10 years old. You may be, I don't know, 7, 8 years old when Thriller comes out.
Yeah.
And then when you're seeing Michael do his thing, by the time Michael is doing Dangerous, you got to be 16 years old. So by the time you reach your 20s and that type of thing like that, uh it's a little bit different. It's a little bit different. So now even though Michael Jackson is always in our consciousness, it's kind of hard to put it in perspective, because you're measuring it by contemporary terms, contemporary numbers. So I was just reflecting on that when you asked me what I wanted to talk about. you know
Yeah, I mean, I I've never personally understood how Chris Brown gets a mention in the same sort of sentence with Michael Jackson. I've I've never really rated his music. I mean, he's a talented singer and performer. I've probably preferred Usher to him, but I wouldn't even put Chris Brown um, in the same bracket as, say, Beyonce, and even Beyonce would acknowledge who Michael is. So I don't know if there's something that these guys are seeing with Chris Brown that the rest of us don't see. Um, and as I said, regardless of what happened with himself and Rihanna, I don't know if how much of a difference that made, because I don't know if he makes the kinds of music that that transcends generations, that transcend um, cultures. I don't think he's created that type of stuff where people would say, so it's hard to understand as a performer. Even as a performer, he doesn't. He's not doing anything innovative.
hmm
He's not the his videos or his choreography isn't like he's just doing something that like wow. When I looked at, say, Bobby Brown during the time when Michael's on the top, Bobby Brown carved a niche where people said, "Wow, this guy is something." MC Hammer, he brought something different and new, and so that we were saying, wow, who's the best out of the three of them? I don't think Chris Brown comes up and does anything that we're like, wow, he's at that level, because I don't even think he's at Usher's level when Usher was at that age. So yeah, and I think sometimes I think Tank respects Chris Brown and stuff, but I don't understand how, forget Thriller. If we just took Thriller out the way, the 100 million sold, and you thought of Off the Wall, and you thought of Bad and Dangerous, and you forget those sales, but think about the impact that Michael made globally, um, how he revolutionized music videos, how he changed his fashion, how um, even the tours and concerts he had. Because when Jay-Z is saying that, oh well, Beyonce, Michael hasn't done a Coachella, so Beyonce has done. So and I'm thinking, well, Coachella's even if Michael at his peak, they couldn't afford him at Coachella. That's too small for him. You know, Beyonce can't go to Poland and sell out their national stadium. She can't go to Russia and go to parts of the continent of Africa and all the world and sell out in the same numbers. I mean, she has fans, but not like that. Chris Brown can't do that. So there's no artist that does that. So I don't know how they could compare. And even Chris Brown is, of course, he's loving the comparison, but that's a disrespect. It's like, when people compare, what's his name, LeBron James to Michael Jordan, and then people say, well, can you compare LeBron to Kobe Bryant? And that's probably the kind of level you want to start to talk about. So it's like, you don't just go straight for the king. I mean, when you think of Michael, though, I mean, just taking away the comparison and stuff. But when you think about Michael, um, what do you think was, he came out with many albums, but as a solo artist, what do you think was his sort of the record that really says, okay, this guy, vocally and creatively was his thing?
Well, Michael Jackson, sometimes people they measure him, and all this talk is fun talk, who's better and the comparison. Sometimes it's fun, but it gets a little out of hand because it to me it goes beyond the record. The records are moments in time. So if you look at, and I hate to use just those 4 albums because Michael Jackson had done solo records before then, but I'll just say that with each album that most people are familiar, each album that most people are familiar with, I'll just go there, and in our conversation, I can kind of just drop a few things. The Off the Wall album was very, very timely. I always say that Michael Jackson was a person who was young enough. He was young. He was old enough to see around the corner, but he was young enough to kind of be an artist of his time. But he was old enough to be an artist within his time, but he was young enough to see around the corner. And what I mean by that is that all of those albums are a reflective of what Michael Jackson wanted to do in music. Off the Wall was very significant because it kind of changed the presentation of what a Black artist can be. Prior to that, obviously, the Black artists are putting out albums, and when he comes out, it's like the album, it's totally crafted for him. Everything that Quincy Jones and his team is putting into the album, and it was almost like a reintroduction to Michael Jackson. And of course, many of the songs were dance orientated. So it suited Michael Jackson's presentation because Michael Jackson was a dancer. So the songs were in alignment with what his image and what his presentation was. So when you saw him perform, obviously the songs were high quality. So it was right in the pocket with what he was doing. And they resonated with people. You know, obviously Michael Jackson is singing them, but the songs are great, you know. And then, you know, there's the sentiment with the ballads, but it's really it's a dance record. It's a dance album. And that's one of the reasons why the album was, even though it sold 8 or 9 million copies at the time it had come out, it was overlooked on a larger scale come award time, because it was just looked at, okay, it's a dance album. And dance music sometimes is kind of looked at as not as ambitious as other types of music, you know, that has more serious overtones.
But are you referring to? Hey, Woody, were you
What is
referring
that,
My
to?
brother?
man,
Yeah, I mean, we were just talking about the legacy of Michael Jackson, but I think you're probably in a good space to because Sheldon, you mentioned that Tank had recently had a conversation about how Chris Brown was probably at the level of Michael's. It's just, can you, what did he say?
Well, basically, he was just kind of in his, to kind of paraphrase it, he was kind of placing Chris Brown over Michael Jackson at this point of his career. And, you know, I have to say right now, Chris Brown has a #1 record with her right now, you know. So that's basically what I was actually saying. And then what's happening is that when people do that, when they start, you know, it's fun to compare, but sometimes they're measuring these artists by their accomplishments and by where they're at in a contemporary space. And I think that's really unfair. Even though sometimes it's fun to talk about, but you kind of ruin legacies, because when you look at, when you do things like that, in this conversation that he had, it was, you know, a while ago on one of his platforms, but when you do that, it creates a situation where non-black artists now can be openly critical of our heroes. Like Sam Smith did that, you know, the British singer. At one point, he was like, well, I don't like Michael Jackson. None of his songs were good. You know, I've seen situations where, you know, black comedians would make fun of Michael Jackson with the skin color, and then white people would kind of jump on it, you know. So we have to be very careful when we're dealing with our heroes. So we were discussing the albums. So Off the Wall was a reintroduction to Michael Jackson, because prior to that, people's memory of Michael Jackson was him with a group. And I have to say that as a group, because you can't leave the whole group component out, because that's the thing that he spun off from. So if you ever seen them perform as a group, they are superior bar none. They could sing, they could dance, they can do the routines, they can incorporate other people's songs into their repertoire. So when you look at what they're doing, they're superior. No one, I don't care, New Edition, anybody. When you look at the Jackson 5, Jackson's franchise, there's nobody that goes beyond that that's in contemporary music that comes after that. They're great, but that's the bar. So going back to what I was saying before, Off the Wall is the kind of reintroduction of Michael Jackson. Bad is more of aggressive type of presentation for Michael Jackson, but what it is, Bad is also consistent with the sounds of the 80s, because if you listen to Bad, there's a lot of synthesizers and electronic drum machines, where Off the Wall is more it's strings. There's a lot of live instrumentation. Okay, then when you go ahead, get the Thriller, what Thriller is before Bad, Thriller is a conscious effort to master all formats. So Off the Wall, reintroduction. Thriller represents ambition and purpose. Bad now is a more aggressive and contemporary. And then when you look at Dangerous, now he's changing his style. He's adapting the new sounds that are actually coming out. You know, so when you look at those 4 albums, they represent a different type of Michael Jackson, but Michael Jackson's energy runs concurrently throughout those albums. You know, so I don't think it's like one particular album. I kind of like look at it as a body of work, because stylistically, even though Michael Jackson, he's a great singer, you have to look at Michael Jackson he's not a musician. People say a lot of great things about how he is in the studio, and he's a visionary and all of that, but we can't underestimate the fact that Michael Jackson, in order for him to execute, it's a team component. You got to have musicians and producers and songwriters and all these other components to really enhance that presentation. So he has the platform, like it's a vehicle. He's the chassis. But then when you start adding everything else to the vehicle that makes a Bentley what it is, now you got the full product. So it doesn't underestimate what his talent is, but he's the type of person that really, when he's linked up with the right components, it's great. But at the core of who Michael Jackson is, he's an entertainer at the base, and that's what separates him from Chris Brown's, the Ushers, and all of that. Because what Michael Jackson does when he comes into the game, he comes through as a singer. He comes through in the traditional presentation of a black stand-up vocal group. The Jacksons were never a boy band. Like New Edition was never a boy band. Like Drew Hill was never a boy band. They were a stand-up vocal group that comes in the tradition of previous stand-up vocal groups in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. They're carrying on that tradition. But then there's a point in time, obviously, where Michael's like the youngest. So Michael's looking toward the future. He's looking toward what he wants to do, and he can't do it within the confines of the group situation, even though they're great. But to execute that, he's linking up with Quincy Jones. Now, also, you got to look at the fact that he's linking up with Quincy Jones. He's putting these great albums out. If you look at the Billie Jean, if you look at his first videos, Don't Stop Till You Get Enough, Billie Jean, those are kind of like within the scope of the low budget black videos that were out. But once Billie Jean took off, then CBS, Epic, we know him as Sony now, then he started putting more money into the album. So now you started to see the budget videos. So even though Michael Jackson was coming out, he was still in the lane of a traditional black artist in terms of the marketing and all of that stuff, the presentation, the promotion. But then once, Billie Jean hit through the roof, then now next thing you know, CBS is throwing the money at him. So now you're seeing these major videos like Beat It, but even his vision is what it is. So Michael Jackson he's an entertainer at his core. But without Sony, Epic, CBS, without them big pockets they had, he wasn't going to be the Michael Jackson that we know now, because they had the budget. The same way Beyonce was linked up with Sony. They have money. So they're able to put you out on the highest, biggest platform. So you need that, because you all know you can have all the talent in the world, but if they're not presenting you to the public in the right way, you're going to fall through the cracks. So Michael Jackson had all of those things, but at the core of who he was, which separates him from Chris Brown and Usher and all of that, Michael Jackson is an entertainer, and he came up in the time of entertainers. He studied entertainers as a young boy. He's watching musicals. He's pulling all types of things. So Michael Jackson is less of an originator. He's an innovator, but his skill is being able to pull from different type of inspirations and filtering through his talents, because everything that you see, whether it's the Smooth Criminal video, some of his attire, his fashion, a lot of that stuff is pulled from things that he saw in the past. But a lot of people think that Michael Jackson just came down off of a spaceship and boom, hey, I am a Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson, he evolved. He evolved into that.
Yeah, and he does admit learning from James Brown and Flip Wilson. But then Woody, from yourself as a recording artist, when was Michael Jackson sort of the gold standard, like, okay, this is a recording artist that we he's on another level than the rest of us are on this level. But what was it? How was it like when you are a recording artist? Does the labels say, well, yeah, we'd love you to sell a Thriller, but we manage if you just go platinum.
Man, I mean, it never really came up in conversations like with the label amongst us as artists. We always talked about Mike, but like Sheldon said, like it was more like his aspect of being an entertainer, like just all around, like being able to sing, dance, and like together with the help of a lot of great people that he was allowed to collaborate with. I'm so glad you touched on it, bro, because I was having that conversation with somebody a couple of days ago. But just like having the means to just do it all, like all the way around the scope. Like he wasn't just, you don't go to a Michael Jackson show and like with our group, it was definitely a big emphasis put on the entertainment value. Too much to my chagrin, or I wasn't really trying to hear that because I was just the other thing like, man, we know how to sing real good, so we don't need to do all this extra stuff. But then when people talk about, well, that depends on what level you want to get to. If you want to be just on the urban level or whatever, then that's good. But if you try to get to that other level over there, that pop success and all that, you got to be able to do the dancing. You got to be able to do the whatever to keep the fans entertained. We got to have these crazy videos at some point like that. And then it was like Michael Jackson, the gold standard was like Michael Jackson for that. I was told like Michael Jackson and Earth, Wind and Fire. Like if you
Wow.
can't put together a show like Michael Jackson or Earth, Wind and Fire, then that's the people that will be able to tour forever. No matter how old you get, you'll always be able to go out on tour and do this and that and the third. If you could put together a show that's on the level of like an MJ show or Earth, Wind and Fire show, you know.
What about the because for an audience that got into the music, say into 2000s,
Mm-hmm.
and they looking at people like Chris Brown, and they're looking at, say, Beyonce,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have Jay-Z, trying to push up his wife, like now she's now taken over, or you have Tank and others saying, yep, Chris Brown actually could have just almost overtaken Michael had he not had this sort of domestic violence stuff with Rihanna.
Mm-hmm.
I personally, maybe I'm biased because Michael Jackson is my all-time favorite. So, and maybe I'm of a generation that we couldn't see anybody. I mean, I admitted when Bobby Brown was coming up and Hammer, we thought, wow, they're going to give him a run for his money.
Yeah.
But there's no part of me that understands how Chris Brown can be spoken about when there's talking about Michael Jackson. But maybe, as I say, I'm biased. But as yourself, Woody, as a recording artist, do you see where people might have any similarities or draw from, or what are your thoughts?
I kind of see it like apples and oranges. I think that Chris Brown is great for his time right now. I think that Chris Brown is a phenomenal artist for right now. I love his first album more than any of the others. And I heard some
Yes.
interviews with the people that he collaborated with on that one. And I think that if he probably would go back, well, I mean, that's kind of similar because a lot of people say if Michael would have stuck with Quincy and the team that he had, that the rest of his albums going on out further would have been just as great. I think if Chris Brown, and it's probably not too late, link back up with them same producers, same writers that he did that first album with, then maybe we could have this conversation, make maybe 4 or 5 more albums with that crew. Then maybe we could have that conversation. But I think Chris Brown is more of like, we love to see him dance. We love his energy when he go out, and I love when he just go on his rants and stuff and talk crap about the industry and stuff like that. I like that of him. So I'm definitely not saying anything bad about him, but I definitely don't see him on the same level of where I see Michael Jackson, and that's just me personally. Nothing against him. I love his music. I love that first album. I still bang that. My little brother and sister put that in and played it for me when they was like the same. They about the same age as him. So like they was like 15 and 16. They was like, Lutro, you gotta hear this. And I'm like, okay. And I put it on because they told me to put it on. And then next thing you know, I was rocking to it. I'm like, I went back up to them, like, man, let me hold that CD with y'all. Let me hold here earlier. So he definitely got it. But I think that he probably got to do a little bit more in order for me to see him on that same level where Mike.
But then, what about, say, Beyonce and Chris Brown? I mean, when you look at the two of them as singers,
Mm-hmm.
performers, who would you say has the upper hand? Forget the fact that Beyonce has won, all these Grammys and all these
Mm-hmm.
nominations, and has been elevated by the media as the queen and stuff, but just from without the industry backing, when you see them as performers, singers.
Well, I'm going to tell you this, because again, everything we look at now is based on the stats. Because again, in the past 30 years, we're always we've been in tune to who's producing the records, whether it's the person that's writing and are they producing their records, all of the specific accomplishments. But the accomplishments are offshoot of who the artist is, and of course, there are other components that are there, their business and all that stuff that's a major contributing factor. So when I look at both of them, I kind of see them, they're parallel. They're of their time. I mean, think about it, is that Chris Brown's first record was 2005. Beyonce record, it was like 1997 or something like that. So think about it, respectively. That's what, 97, and then 2005. So that's 8 years apart. So we're talking about they're roughly 25, almost 20 years into the game as an artist, where their brands have survived all, the total metamorphosis of R&B and where we're at now. So for them to still be maintaining, you have to give them a lot of credit, and it has to do with their popularity as artists. Yeah, we can say it's hype, it's this, but at the end of the day, who they are as entertainers, they have people who actually gravitate to them. Because remember, people who are Chris Brown fans, Michael Jackson was in a way past his prime by the time Chris Brown came on. Michael Jackson's prime arguably was probably somewhere in the 80s, and that's like almost 25 years before Chris Brown. So you got to look at when these people are coming, and I don't necessarily separate them, but I look at them as they're almost the equivalent of when you look at like a Michael Jackson and a Whitney Houston. They're out in the 80s. It's the same equivalent where you've got two prominent, I don't want to say big, because big, you can't really define that, but I'll say two prominent Black entertainers who have maintained high profile careers. But Michael is in a whole different category, because this is what Michael Jackson did. Michael Jackson broke the mold of what a prominent Black artist could be. Because prior to that, when you were a Black entertainer, you had to be able to sing. I'll use Sammy Davis Jr. was the bar, because Sammy Davis Jr. could sing.
Really?
Sammy Davis Jr. could dance. Sammy Davis Jr. could do impressions. He could play instruments. So that when you went on stage, you had to have the whole package. Or if you were an entertainer back then, nobody was writing their own music. So you would have a show where you would sing songs that were previously written by somebody else. They might be jazz standards. They might take in a new song that somebody had written, and you had to have a show. And then on the other side was the bar was you had to be a great musician. You had to be a great musician. Going back to what he was saying with Earth, Wind, and Fire, that was the bar. Earth, Wind, and Fire always said what we did in the 70s with our concerts is what Michael Jackson did in television in the 80s. Michael Jackson comes along and he creates a whole different lane as an entertainer, to where now it's not about, now I got to sing these runs. I got to have these powerful vocals. I don't have to be a musician. I could be an entertainer. But the thing about Michael Jackson's success is that he comes along, Off the Wall is a reintroduction to who he is. But remember, by the time Off the Wall comes out, Michael Jackson is 21 years old. So he has a whole generation of people who remember him when he was 10 years old. They remember him when he was 15. They remember him when he was 18. So now he comes out in 21, and it's like, oh, wow, this is a totally different type of Michael Jackson. It's a repackaging, and that's what made it so exciting. If you ever get a chance to talk to L.A. Reid will tell you he was a musician in the 70s. He's the same age as Michael Jackson. He was a musician in the 70s, and their thing was, we're copying off Sly and the Family Stone or whatever band was out. Somebody told him Michael Jackson's coming out with a new album. He was like, and? But then when he heard it, he was blown away. So Michael Jackson kind of like he reshaped the image of what a black entertainer was. But then not only was he had the entertainment side, but he had the music aspect to back it up. But then he also had a vision of what I want to do things just beyond the traditional stuff on stage. I also want to go ahead and have use the current medium of the time, which is music videos, to express myself. So now when he comes out with Beat It is like, it's really great. So if I'm 12, 13 years old when Beat It comes out, maybe 13 years old. But anybody who's watching Beat It that's 10, 15, 20 years older than me, they're seeing West Side Story, because that's where Beat It, that's the musical. The musical that comes out I guess in 1960, 61 or something like that. That's a reboot of that. And that's what made Michael Jackson so great, is that when you see Michael Jackson, you see other people who came before Michael Jackson. So if Michael Jackson comes out in 1970, you got somebody that's 45 years old seeing Michael Jackson as a 10-year-old. They seeing Frankie Lyman, okay? They seeing Jackie Wilson. Michael Jackson singing like David Ruffin. He's doing all these songs and all of that. Then when you see him later on, okay, I see this person. I see this in him. I see this in him. But it's still original in terms of who he is, because he's a hybrid. So everybody else who comes after him, whether it's Bobby Brown, Beyonce, Chris Brown, they are a hybrid of what Michael Jackson was doing. And Janet Jackson, you got to put her in that category. So he creates that singular vein of an entertainer that kind of like breaks out the traditional package of what a black entertainer is. And then if you want to throw the stats in and the record sales, he changes the game, because once he starts selling records, that's the expectation for a lot of record companies, is that you don't have to sell 20 million records, but you're not selling 30,000 records over here. So he made it very hard for a lot of black entertainers, because it was him and a handful of other people. He was like an upper echelon. Then you had the middle echelon and you had a lower echelon. He created that. But what it was also his undoing, because he went so far beyond his base, and we could respect him as an entertainer. But again, time's like an athlete. You play them all, and before you know it, you're still great. But as time goes on, we're starting to see the cracks in our armor. So we respect you, we love you. So now that's how people can go in and say, okay, Beyonce is this person, Chris Brown is this person, because we're looking at an older Michael Jackson. We're looking at a 50-year-old Michael Jackson. But if you put a 15-year-old, you put a 15-year-old Michael Jackson with a 10-year-old Beyonce, 10-year-old Chris Brown, Michael Jackson's going to be here. You put a 15-year-old Michael Jackson against a 15-year-old Beyonce, 15-year-old Chris Brown, and you go on and on. So up until, let's say, about 30, maybe 35, now they've caught up. So people are measuring Michael Jackson and the Beyoncés and the Chris Brown by an older memory of what Michael Jackson was. People are always going to respect him. They're always going to love him, but you got to look at his career in its totality. Not even just, I'm not even talking about the music, just from the legacy, from the history. Then when you put the music into it, and then the last thing I'll say is that voice that he has a tenor voice, soprano voice. So if I'm a kid and I'm singing and I want to sing, Michael Jackson is going to be my reference, because if I go and watch a YouTube video and I'm seeing a 12-year-old Michael Jackson, a 15-year-old Michael Jackson do his thing, and then I'm seeing everything that happens in the Thriller era, I'm hooked.
Yeah,
I'm hooked.
Yeah, but I think it's the way the industry does. So they never allow anyone compare to Elvis. It's almost as if he's the king of rock and roll. He's a king, and he's always gonna be untouched. That's how the industry is. So he's given his status, and anyone that tries to challenge that, they tear you down. The Beatles.
Well, you know what? Because what you just said, the reason why that is because what Elvis did is the music industry before he came along, it was just almost like how rap music was with all the independent labels. So when pop music started to become more corporate, Elvis was a singular artist, much like a Michael, much like a Beyonce. He was a singular artist that the industry was able to build itself around. But at the same time, Elvis had the hype because he had a manager, Colonel Tom Parker, who really exploited him, put him in movies. So the stuff that he was doing at the time when he was doing it, nobody was doing it like him. He was in movies, singing in the movies and all these other types of things. But what it was that he was the singular artist that the industry built itself around, and they created that legend to make it seem like he was the best. But look at these people. The people who talk about Elvis now, that he's a king, they're 30 and 40 years old. They wasn't even born when he was doing this thing. But that mentality came from people who were older. So that's a mentality that's inherited by younger people.
Yeah, but it's been preserved though, and as I said,
right,
they're not respecting and preserving Michael Jackson's legacy.
But
the
thing about it,
became king of pop and this and that.
But you know why that is, though. The reason why that is that they're not preserving Michael's history is because, one, you got a black artist, you got a white artist. All right, I've seen situations where Michael Jackson's album Thriller is gone up and down as the biggest selling domestic album in the States of all times, and there's another album that's kind of like close to it.
The Eagles. The Eagles.
And I've seen people on Facebook, they change back and forth. And I've seen people that when the Eagles get, now they kind of pass Thriller for a while. I've seen people say they're happy. They're happy that it's done that, because a lot of people, man, in terms of Michael Jackson, it's a race thing. Sometimes it's a taste thing, but between both of them, it's taste and then it's race. But the reason why Michael Jackson's legacy is not preserved the way it is, obviously you can look at all the legal things and all of that, but what happens is we kind of look at the stats. When people talk about the stats, they just talk about Thriller, and I think it's a shame. They look at Michael Jackson as a Thriller, as in terms of Thriller, but they don't look at what he did before Thriller. Because you got to understand, if you go talk to Babyface, you go talk to Oprah, you go talk to any artist that was born any artist that was born, entertainer, media person that was born in the mid 50s, and they were born probably up until about maybe the 70s. That's 20 years. They're gonna tell you Michael Jackson was their jump off, man. The first generation of rappers, they was looking at the Jackson 5. That was their inspiration. When you look at Oprah Winfrey, she would tell you that one of the older brothers was the one she had a crush on. Babyface will tell you when he went to see the Jackson 5 in Market Square Arena in Indianapolis, that ignited something in him, made him want to be an entertainer. You will talk to Lenny Kravitz. He went to see Michael Jackson in Madison Square Garden in 1972, performing looking through the windows. So when you look in terms of Michael Jackson's influence and the group, but you look at who he was, there was no young artists before him. So if you're of a certain age, he's always going to resonate with you. But think about it, is that when you look at the Tanks and everybody who's saying what they're saying, remember, Tank is born in 76. So you got to do the math. So he's 8 years old when Thriller comes out. So yeah, you're kind of familiar with Thriller, but you're a child. Okay. When what is that? Dangerous comes out, he's 15. So think about it. Everybody's their attitudes and stuff, they're shaped by their experience of when they first come in contact with these artists. That's why when you look at Beyonce and Chris Brown, it's like the Kobe and the LeBron situation. When Michael Jordan was coming out, nobody, it was like before him, even when you had Magic and all these people, what Michael Jordan was doing was totally different. Everything that was surrounding him. When you look at Beyonce, when you look at Chris Brown, they're coming out with a bunch of young groups. So when you come out with a bunch of young groups and you see them rise to the top, and I give them credit because look at everybody, whether it's from Monica, whether anybody who was out in the 90s, anybody who was out in the early 2000s or whatever that were out, Beyonce has survived and thrived. She's made that higher, she's had that higher echelon. Look at Chris Brown. He came out with Run It in 2005, and look how many groups was out. Look how many artists were out at the time, and he's still there. So you got to give them credit, but at the same time, you have to break. When you start pulling stuff away, you'll see the smoke screen. You'll see the limitations because Chris Brown. I saw one guy who was about 40 something years old, 45 years old. Oh, Chris Brown is a better dancer than Michael Jackson. But here it is, Chris Brown, you're doing freestyle. You're doing choreography, but you're doing freestyle dancing. But if you look at Michael Jackson and you watch Michael Jackson do choreography with his brothers, he's doing a traditional choreography. Then he's doing choreography where he's pulling from musicals and movies, where he's doing the whole rigid, tap dance and the whole, that type of thing. Then you're seeing him do other things within the hip hop perspective. But at the same time, you still see the signature Michael Jackson. So he's always going to be, the bar. He's going to be the inspirational bar. So long after everyone else is gone, he will be it. Now, don't get me wrong. And people will probably hate on me when I say this, is that Beyonce, if you look at any artist, Beyonce is at Michael Jackson proportions now. And what I mean by that is in terms of her popularity, in terms of her durability as an artist, and her commercial success. Because if you look at Beyonce's 41. All right. But when you saw Michael at 40 and 41, totally different. So Beyonce has been able to maintain that level of not just level of success, but of level. She never dropped off. Michael Jackson here and there, but things happen. But at the same time, you can't hold that against people because nobody rocks forever. Nobody's going to rock forever. You got to look at their career in totality. You can't look at it just as a career record. But you said something, Nnamdi, about how come they don't cherish the legacy. But Woody said something about, okay, Dru Hill. At the core, these guys are singers. But the thing is that their management is saying, okay, you need to go on the pop side and do the other things that will attract the pop audience. But you're basically telling them is you need to abandon what got you there and abandon the core, the history of the legacy of Black music that's in their DNA, that's in their energy. You want them to throw that away to go ahead and go on the pop side, to go ahead and get the artists, to get the fans. But that shows you the mentality that mentality exists now, that we look at everything, we measure it by the pop success. But some things you can't measure by pop success. Case in point, now it was 4 of them. I'm talking about Dru Hill. It was 4 of them doing their thing, right? But now you got like 5 or 6 of them cats out there right now trying to go ahead and reaccomplish what it took only 4 people to do, the 4 original members. Now you got 6 people out there there you go. Now they turn it into Earth, Wind, and Fire. You know what I'm saying? They turned it into Earth, Wind, and Fire. Trying to recapture the magic from what I saw. The tickets, they've dropped ticket prices and they're trying to get people to come and this, that, and the other. No disrespect to the group, but when you look at the core of who you are, when you pull away from that, a lot of crazy things happen. That's the same with Michael Jackson. When you start pulling all of that, you pull him away from the core, his center of who he was. First of all, what he meant to Black music. Then the imitators, because everybody's pulling from him, whether it's a Justin Timberlake, whether it's Pharrell, whether it's this one, that one, Bobby, Usher. Everybody's pulling from the Michael Jackson. Neo is you're doing Michael Jackson records. Justin Timberlake, you're doing Michael Jackson records. You know what I'm saying? So there's nobody imitating Beyonce. There's nobody imitating Chris Brown. But you always got to, and always, people say, oh man, history, but you always got to use history as a base because you never go wrong. And that's the biggest thing with our Black legacy. If you stay within the historical context and you look at the alignment, you never go wrong. And that's what Michael Jackson did. Even though he was doing what he was doing, he always acknowledged the people who came before him and what he was doing. That's what made him great. That's what made him, you couldn't duplicate what he was doing. Yeah, you could sing like him. You could try to dance like him. But Michael Jackson had a sense of history, not just with the Black music side. Once again, you watch the Smooth Criminal videos, you watch the Beat It videos, you watching the way She Makes Me Feel video. All of that stuff is rooted in other types of music, other types of styles. And like you said, now that's what makes him attractive. And then you are the ballads. You're a Michael Jackson ballad guy. So when he sings the ballads, there's a sensitivity that he has singing those ballads. But when you hear him sing Lady in My Life, when you hear him sing Liberian Girl, That's the same Michael Jackson sensitivity. If you go back and you listen to him as a 12-year-old singing Never Can Say Goodbye, it's the same sensitivity to be able to deliver that emotion, that sentiment in the records that Chris Brown don't have.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, Woody, because what we're going to do is we'll wrap this up soon and move on to another topic. But just to summarize, I mean, your thoughts on Mike and the other artists, and just as I said, from your background and experience.
One thing I say about Mike and Brother Sheldon, you probably can help me because you know better than me. But Mike, at his last performances, like his later performances, like you said, like 50-year-old Mike and probably a little bit younger, it was a time where he did a lot of lip syncing and he just was dancing. But it was a lot of years where Mike was showing up on that stage, hitting every one of them steps and singing them songs and sounded just like the record. A lot of these new artists, they get maybe like 1 or 2 albums where you hear them singing for real. And then after that, they get people going and paying thousands of dollars for a show to watch them lip sync. So I can't compare nobody that's lip syncing to somebody that was out there singing full voice and doing the choreography and doing all of it, So that's a big credit to Mike, and that's something else that to me puts him way ahead of a lot of artists now, because like the shows now just seem so like cookie cutter and formulated. Like his stuff just seemed more like authentic and coming from the heart, coming from the gut. And a lot of that is attributed to the fact that he was the first. He was the blueprint, but it's like people can take little bits and pieces of it and make it work for them and make whole careers out of them. I'm not knocking none of them, but it's like nothing like the real thing. Like when I was sitting there talking with Casey and Mr. Dalvin the other night, and I said to them, I said, man, the original is always going to be better than the copy. And it's like no matter how much hype somebody can put behind somebody, how much promotion that you can put behind somebody to make everybody believe that they that, it's like when you put it next to the real thing, like they say with money, when they teach the FBI agents about how to know how to tell fake money from real money, they said that they just teach them so much about real money. They don't even take time teaching them about fake money. They teach them so much about real money that the minute they see the fake money, that they know that something ain't right. So it's like when you were brought up on the authentic and on the real thing, you're going to be able to see that something about that, like, that's cool. It's nice. But it ain't like Marvin Gaye and Tammy saying nothing like the real thing. So like I don't think anybody moving forward would be able to be on Mike's level. Like you might sell as many records with them push from your label, or they can even falsify numbers and all that stuff. They say men lie, women lie, numbers don't. Numbers can lie too. They could be padded. They could be some taken off. Sometimes your label don't want you to do as well as you doing because they want to humble you. So they'll give away some of your copies and stuff, or poke them with that little hole punch to make it look like you ain't sell as many as you sold. So numbers can lie to you. Numbers can be doctored up, but it's like as far as that pure feeling and that pure energy that you get when you watching somebody that's really doing it and it's really them doing it, ain't nobody helping them out like that. Or as far as like the vocal, definitely getting help, because ain't nobody making it all the way out there like that and get to the public without some help, just like Brother Sheldon pointed out. But it's like when you really up there doing it, as opposed to you up there doing this and the record back there doing the singing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So when somebody is able to do that, then I can be ready to compare somebody to Mike. But other than that, I think we just named a bunch of great artists for their time. But I don't think that none of the artists that we named, and a lot of times I even hear Drake thrown out there. And I think Drake is close not as far as his quality of music, but as far as him being able to adapt. Like Brother Sheldon was saying, like Drake or his team or whoever does it does a great job of finding out what's new and what's hot, and then they'll find a way for Drake to incorporate that into his next songs or whatever. Like if a SoundCloud rapper is up and coming and he got a certain style, next thing you know, you're going to hear Drake with a remix with that rapper. And then he going to adapt the style, and then because he's bigger, people going to think that was Drake's style when the whole time he got it from that other artist. So he's a hell of a researcher, and he knows how to incorporate people's styles with his styles. But at the end of the day, so I would say like as far as that, I could see the comparison, but it's like still the feeling that Mike gave you when you was little, and I'm the same age as Tank. I was born in '76 too, But the feeling I got the first time I saw that Pepsi commercial with Mike and Carlton dancing in the middle of the street,
yeah, yeah.
It's never been another artist to this day that made me, like feel like that. Like I can't dance at all, but I was up there standing in the living room doing my best little impressions in between my mama telling me to stop because she ain't want me listening to that kind of music. But man, I had the whole outfit. I had the beaded jacket. I had the socks. I had the little church pants and everything, man. The shades with his face on it. Like to make somebody feel like that and make their fans feel like that they actually want to be these people. It's very few artists that nowadays they give you that feeling,
And what he just said, I'm sorry. Well, what he just said is important because when you see Michael Jackson do those videos and he's doing the commercials, and you don't see black artists, you hadn't seen black artists do that in a long time. They used to be like Budweiser commercials. A cat named Lou Rawls, he was doing those commercials. He was really big at the time. So Michael Jackson is the only one. So when you see what Michael Jackson is doing is the equivalent of what Beyonce is doing on the Coachella, because Michael Jackson is reaching large audience. Just because Michael Jackson is doing a Coachella, there was no Coachella in Michael Jackson's time.
Yeah, but even if there was, he wouldn't have done it. I mean, that's that. Maybe when he was doing Off the Wall, but not when he was after Thriller. I mean,
but Off the Wall, he wasn't going to be able to do it because at that point, even though he was selling records, Michael Jackson was a star, but he wasn't a superstar. He was a star in the black community, but he wasn't like looked at as global. I mean, and keep in mind, he had a lot of success. But when you look at the Coachella thing, again, people have to when they try to compare people, they're always going to compare and look at their accomplishments. But when you look at what Michael Jackson was doing, he was doing stuff that people are doing today that nobody was doing. And even if you're talking about the business side, okay, even though he had the ambition, I want to put these long form videos out. When he wanted to do the Thriller video, CBS was like, no, we're not paying for this. We're not paying for this. He went in his own pocket and he paid for the Thriller video. He paid for the Thriller video out of his own pocket. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So, and then you talk about just also absorbing. Because he wasn't like as far as being traditionally educated, but he learned by seeing and absorbing. So imagine having a conversation with Paul McCartney, and then a year later you buying publishing, because Michael Jackson hadn't written a lot of songs at that point. He hadn't written a lot of songs. He probably had written maybe 15 songs maybe at that point in time when he bought that publishing. Wow. So in terms of a songwriter, Michael Jackson hasn't written a lot of songs in his career, but he owns a lot of songs. So even if you talk about the business side, even if you want to do that, you still can't compare. But I always kind of keep it down to the core of what it is. But I want to just throw that in. I know you're about to go to another topic, but I want to just throw that in there.
Yeah. I mean, I think, for myself, as I said, he's always been but my all-time, alongside Steven Spielberg and Teddy Riley. But when you have people like Crazy Bo, when I interviewed him, and he said that he wanted to be an entertainer when he saw Motown 25. So, you think of Bones Thugs and Harmony, you say Crazy Bo saying he saw that and said that inspired me. Heavy D has said it, that most rappers, when they heard Off the Wall, it was like, wow. And when Michael would reach out to anybody, whether it's Naughty by Nature, anybody, or Jay-Z, no one's thought that they all ran, he was always the pinnacle. There was not one person who has seen him and met him.
Even Biggie did a song with Michael Jackson. You remember at them times people would think that a rapper was quote unquote soft if they did a song with a singer, but he ain't turned that down.
Dallas Austin said Dallas Austin reached out to him and said, I've got this mic joint, and then he said, please let me get on it. And he did his verse. And he says, whoa, he told Biggie that maybe it's a little too hardcore, but he let Michael listen to it. Michael says, I love it just as it is. And so it's everybody. I mean, so as I said, I feel that there's an agenda within the industry to try and discredit him, try and diminish his achievements. They did that in the 90s when he was going to break more records with Dangerous, and then they just brought up all these things came about, and they won't do anything with Elvis marrying an underage girl and any of that stuff. They'll hide that stuff, but they've targeted him. They don't want him to break any records. They They still keep the Beatles up there. They keep re-releasing singles so that they can use that to stack up against him. He sold more albums than any other artist. However, Elvis and the Beatles, they keep releasing singles, and they combine all those ones to say, well, they've sold more. So as I said,
they moved them. They moved the needle. They moved the bar. So it's like no matter what, they always kind of move it. But you know what though, they can continue to do it. But again, we're talking about stats, and of course, stats are very important when it comes to history. But when you look in terms of the intangible impact, you can't put a cap on that.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing, but the thing is that that's why it's important for platforms like yours, because you're able to kind of capture those things to remind people who Michael Jackson is. And here's the thing: people can put the cap, they can move the needle, but all you got to do is you look at those YouTube videos of him performing at any age. And for people, that's all, and that's going to always make him an eternal artist. Yeah, the numbers, they try to skew the numbers, but it is what it is. But in the end, like you said, numbers, and they're not going to lie. But in the end, numbers don't tell the entire story.
Not at all. I mean, my kids, in 9, 10, if I they know who Michael Jackson is. Now, he died before they were born, but my kids know who he is. They don't know who
Elvis is. They don't know.
Yeah, they don't know who Chris Brown is. They may know Beyonce, but that's, as I said, they were born, 2010, 2012, but they all know who Michael is. Even my 6-year-olds would all know who he is. And I remember Donnie Simpson saying the same thing when I interviewed him. He says his grandkids all know Michael Jackson. They all, because, and there's nothing you can do about trying to, they try to counsel him. They try to do all what they can, but it's a shame for me to think that because he's black, that they didn't want to celebrate him. They wanted to bring him down.
But you got to look at it. They always marginalized him. When he put out Off the Wall, it was probably one of the biggest selling albums. But at the time, it was a whole negative attitude toward dance music. So dance music and because his music was like, it had that dance element,
like disco kind of thing,
he didn't get the respect come award time. But I want to tell you this: I was 9 years old when Elvis died, and I remember people were like, the way people lost their mind when Michael Jackson died, people lost their mind when Elvis died, because for people who, it's almost like people who were young, people who were like 30 years old, 40 years old when Elvis died, Elvis was like a Michael Jackson to them because he represented the music of their youth, and he was huge. But again, with him being a white artist, they're always going to do what they're going to do to elevate these artists. Even so, when you break out, and then when you start pulling things away from Elvis, he's the same way. He's pulling all these different energies into his music. But I watch documentaries, and what they try to do is they make him say, okay, well, yeah, he saw the black gospel singers, he saw the white gospel singers, but what he did, he created something and he made it his own. So it's not so much, it's the media that actually, they spin that story. So what happens is people who've never seen Elvis or whatever that is, or whatever, they're looking at these people. And of course, music is music. Same situation with the Beatles. I'm gonna give you the Beatles story real quick. The Beatles, there's an A Beatles and there's a B Beatles. There's an A Beatles before they get with their producer George Martin, where they're doing the guitars and the drums, and then later on they start to get to the studio stuff. But it's not them. They have George Martin. He's their Teddy Riley at the time. He's their Teddy Riley. So when you look at all the music from Sgt. Pepper on, where they're experimenting in the studio, that's not entirely them. That's a producer, George Martin, that's working with them and gave them a whole new sound. But the Beatles evolved. They moved past all the people who they had come out with. So they wound up being who they were. But again, the music industry is predominantly white. People keeping the stats, the media. So they're always going to sell that image of who it was, because one of the things the Beatles did is the Beatles ended the reign of songwriters. Before, you had singers and then you had songwriters. So if you were a singer or a band, somebody wrote your music. But when the Beatles started writing their own music, it changed the game, and then all other groups start, okay, I'm write my own music. So I give them credit in terms of what they are, but you got to look at what Michael Jackson was doing. He created the lane, but because Michael Jackson is not a musician, They'll try to pull that away from him. He don't play any instruments. In terms of singing, like Woody said, maybe the past 20 years or something like that, 15 years, Michael Jackson is performing, but there's a lot of lip syncing. There's a lot of technology going on. So sometimes people lose the essence. They forget the essence of who he was as a pure entertainer. Now, based on what age you are, that's going to be okay, because that's where everybody's into the technology now in terms of singing, lip singing, auto tune, and all of that. But what Michael Jackson is doing, which is really smart, Michael Jackson is making a concession to the style of people, how they entertain now. He's going to keep the bar high, but he's going to go ahead and incorporate what everyone else is doing now. You see it with Janet Jackson the same way.
Yeah. Okay. Well, guys, we're going to quickly move on, and the other big thing that's out is now I haven't got to see it here in the UK, and that's the SWV and Xscape reality show. Now, normally, as I said, these reality shows are scripted to some degree. They, and in talking to some of the people who were on R&B Divas, both on Angie Stone and Monifa and Nikki Gilbert, and even Stacey Francis, what they've said is they record every element, and then they take what they want to make up a show. But it's been unfortunate to see two sisters of Xscape arguing about money and airing their dirty laundry in public. And because most of us were wondering how come Xscape went from 4 to 3, especially when they were about to sort of blow up. I won't say blow up, almost relaunch themselves. They get the Lady of Soul Train Award. They've got this reality show, and they're about to go on this golden tour, and then it's just the three of them. So I don't know if either one of you have watched it. I mean, Woody, what's been your sort of thoughts about not just the show, but just the fallout from the sisters, especially you're the only one of us that have been in the group situation.
Yeah. It's like you hate to see it publicly like that, because something that Chris Rock said on that
I saw that
when he said, like we were raised that we don't air out our laundry in front of, everybody like that, like the other kinds of people and stuff. Like we keep that most of the time in-house, but it's like you hate that it's happening and everybody's getting to see it. Like anybody can tune in and see that show and see them arguing like that. But at the same time, I'm kind of glad that it's coming out, because like when I would speak on certain things that happened to me, people like, oh no, that ain't happened. They ain't do that. That's unheard of. So now you see these people in real time, like however time that it's coming in on. You see them going through similar things. Like, see, I tried to tell you that's what happened to me. You told me that ain't happened. And these people is just my group members. So if sisters and real siblings that do that to each other, imagine somebody that ain't grew up in the same house with you. I definitely heard stories of checks that belong to me going to certain places and getting cash. I even got sent to me a signature that definitely wasn't my signature signed off on a big check before. So it's like to see that happening, it's like you don't want to be like Misery Love Company, but it's almost kind of like therapeutic to know that I wasn't just like picked by the world to be picked on. Same things happen. Like it's common stuff that happens in the industry all the time. And if it's not a lot of people's favorite artists, then they don't believe it. Or if it's done by somebody's favorite artist, say, oh, they ain't do that. What reason would they have to do that to you? They had more money than you anyway. Why would they do that? So to see the lead singer of the group, and her husband doing that too, her own sister who was also in the group but wasn't out the front like how she was, I'm just like, told you, keep watching. Now all the stuff I was telling you for years coming to life. But I do hope they find a resolve, and I do hope, because I like them as a group, and we all love our groups. And in these days and times where most groups are becoming almost like a thing of the past, like if it is a way to salvage it, it will be cool to see it. But if it doesn't get salvaged and it's because of these type of things, I'd be the biggest hypocrite in the world to say, suck it up and keep on going. Like you saw what I posted earlier about that forgiveness. When the public like something, they always want to say, oh, you just, whoever the one being wrong, oh, they just need to suck it up.
Well,
I
that's what they
think they
keep doing.
jealous of such
That's what
and
they
such
keep.
and
No,
so and
that's what
so.
they keep doing about you. They keep thinking,
Yeah,
"Come
you
on."
see it in your comments every time. I could be talking about the weather outside, and somebody go come in there like, "What he just need to suck it up. Whatever happened with his gospel album or whatever the case may be, he just need to suck it up." And everybody can't. What the one guy said, everybody can't be Tito Jackson. And I went on his page and heard his singing. This man sound like sound like somebody starting up a chainsaw. But people will always have opinion when it's not them. But then same people, I remember when my mom was passing, one last thing. My mom was in the hospital in a coma. And I walked in the room and started crying because that's my mama, you know? And it was a pastor that came to visit. He goes, "Hey, Woody, she can hear you. Get yourself together." And I wasn't the me I was back then. So I listened to him and I got it together. That same pastor jumped in the casket with his mother at her funeral, talking about get up. So
Are
who
you
was being more
serious?
ridiculous? At least if my mama could hear me, maybe she would have got up. She got that bombing fluid in her. She not getting up. So many people just internalize and they make the groups and these celebrities and stuff, they make them their business and their priority. The way as though their own life could be in shambles, but they so worried about what these people need to do. So I just glad that, like I was saying, I'm glad that it's coming out that people can see it and see that it's not just one person complaining about this happening. This is common stuff. Like even though they might have never seen stuff like this is common stuff that happens in the industry. So people should watch with a thing with their lenses to learn, as opposed to saying what they think somebody need to do. Just watch it and see these things that happen, and actually ask yourself if somebody did that to you. Somebody stole the check from you while you was pregnant. Would you be in a hurry to get back up on some stage and get to singing with them and just brush that over like nothing never happened? And maybe some people would, because some people would do anything for money. But
Yeah, but it gets me reflecting when I interviewed Mike and Slim, and they talked about Daron and Q,
mhm.
taking them to court, and they've not seen each other, spoken to each other since they saw in court. And most of us like, man, can't you at least forgive each other and for the fans come back together? But I think it's hard for us as fans because we have the nostalgia of seeing the group together, seeing the
Right,
memories that your music brought us, and so we just
right.
want to keep that back. But unless people listen to your interview telling how challenging was, where you were getting bullied in a group that you formed
Right.
with childhood people, friends, and they started to bully you to the point where you would, it was almost torture just being in there. No
Yeah,
one, no,
somebody
no.
told me I needed to cut my hair off because they wanted to be the only one in the group with cornrows. Like stupid, petty stuff, man. It's just dumb stuff. But at the end of the day, like I told you before, like we can say me, Slim, Deron, Q, Mike, anybody, or the ladies from Xscape could say this all day long. But at the end of the day, people, the fans, are gonna want what they want. They don't care nothing about none of that. Anything that you can show somebody, like on Tom and Jerry and Bugs Bunny, and drop an envelope on somebody's head, and
Mhm.
then the next day, as long as he's still living, they say, man, that man need to come out that life support. He know ain't nothing wrong with him. He need to get on stage with his brothers. They need him, and that's what the culture need. That I'm like, what
Yeah.
the culture ever do for me? That I owe the culture anything, and do it for the culture. Do it for this.
Yeah.
Do it for that. People just want what they want, and it don't matter. When you say people don't care if you okay, they only care if you're good enough to do what it is that they want you to do. They don't care about none of that other stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't realize because, when I spoke with LJ from Profile,
Hmm.
and they had the third album on the table, and he says, "I can't do it, guys. I mentally and physically, I can't do this, and we need to leave because it's just not. We don't. I'm going to leave the deal, Motown and everything, because it's I'm not making any money. We're singing somebody else's songs. They're not giving us publishing, and no one's caring about my well being."
Hmm.
And everyone's thinking, well, why would you leave the industry? As if it's, because we all assumed you guys will, once you sign to a label, you're just making millions of dollars and everything's fine. But then,
I've
what
never seen $1 million.
Yeah, it's when you look at that situation, but when you look at those groups that have the issues, with this reality show, I talked about something earlier. Is that you're gonna have like different? They have different recording artists. It's an echelon. It's an echelon of success. So when you look in terms of somebody like an Xscape, SWV, the whole TV situation, that's the high point, because that's like the bar right now. That's the bar, because there is no other large scale platform that's out there for Black artists really to, especially legacy Black artists, to aspire to, because everything is kind of like the parameters are narrow, because we're doing streaming. These artists were producer driven artists. They sold physical copies, so it's about they're adapting to a new type of climate in terms of entertainment, and of course that's where the reality TV show comes in. But here's the thing, is that a lot of issues that we're seeing when we're watching these shows, these are issues that these people have had for decades. It's just the fact that when they were out in their prime making music, there was no reality TV. So whatever they had going on, that was in the background until it started to come to the forefront, and they really fragmented and they broke up. And that's like with a lot of groups. But when you look at them, and I'm glad that, Xscape is kind of back out into that spotlight, because it's a testament to 90s music, but everything is like it rolls in loops. Because sooner or later, people all of a sudden they go back to this music and realize, I remember that group. They made great music. Everything I love about them. But the mindset is, when we see them on reality TV show, some people are going to look at it like it's really dysfunctional, but there are going to be a lot of people who are going to tune into that, and they're going to see a humanistic image of what the group is beyond the music videos, beyond the record sales, and they're going to make a connection with them. Like, I can see myself in these ladies based on all the things that's actually going on. It's unfortunate that we're seeing the quote unquote dirty laundry aired on television, but remember, is that we're in a period where people are desensitized from that. So they're not looking at these people like, like it's a bad thing. It's just now we're probably in about 15 years, almost 20 years into reality TV. But if you remember Xscape, when they were doing music, you're like, well, wow, that part of it, that's maybe some stuff that you really don't want to know. But that's how it was with artists back then, years ago, is that they made a conscious effort of putting the music out. But behind the scene, these people were drug addicts. They were beating up women and just all type of dysfunctional behavior. But it was something that you had to keep that behind the scenes, because the way entertainment was, it was about your image. So anything that was going to conflict with that stuff was going to be behind the scenes. So they'll be, you see them behind on the camera, they're smiling, they look good, but behind, when they get off, they want to go shoot up and get that, the heroin in them or whatever that is. Same situation with a lot of these female groups, is that the energy that we have, we see the glamour, we see all of that is going on, man. But there's a lot of stuff that they actually have to go through within the industry. You're dealing with the chauvinistic mentality of the industry, producers, situation with the business side, all of that, and that can really break a person. Because remember, these people now in their 40s, but their greatest success that they ever had, for a lot of them, was in their 20s. So imagine being successful in your early 20s, and at that point in time, that's supposed to be the period where you're supposed to reap the benefits, and you don't reap the benefits, and you go through your life as you get older and older, and somebody like you, oh, so-and-so Xscape, in your eyes, wow, that's major. I'm seeing someone from Xscape. But from that person, that's the worst part of their lives, because all they can associate that with is, I'm being robbed, embezzling my money, I'm being bullied. And that's a hard thing to contend with. And from the artists that you have on your platform, is that to look back at that time for some of them, it's extremely painful.
We only have to look at Woody here, because you don't look at
everything you just said. Everything you just said, man. That's like, I tell people that was the worst time of my life.
And I'm gonna tell you something.
People going to give their memories and say, "Oh, I got married to this song," or "I got my first piece of coochie to this song." I was like, "Well, I got told to sit in the corner because I wasn't good enough to this song," and then I got told that a group that I started, now somebody else, I got to tell people that this person started the group because they don't sing like the rest of us, and we don't want people to think they're not here for nothing. So that's what happened to me to these songs. You know?
I remember when you started going on your platform in the early 2000s and you started really like sharing a lot of stuff. Man, they was making it seem like you was crazy.
Yeah, that's what they always do to people that's telling the truth.
They were making it seem like you were crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, he want to go do this gospel. I remember you did the magazine. Thank God, even on 54, I still got a good memory. I remember when you did the sister to sister interview with Jamie Foster Brown, and you kind of laid it all out in terms of everything that had happened. But people were making it seem like, and this at the time when Scope was like huge, but they was making it seem like Woody was crazy. But the bottom line, they were making it seem like, oh man, this guy, he's complaining, he's just really mentally off because he's sharing like, hey, this didn't happen. I was trying to do this, and you know, but the way they were doing it, and it goes back to the industry mentality is that we're going to go ahead and put together a group, and instead of creating music where it's going to showcase the singing, the identity of the group, they made one person the identity, but in the short term, it might have been good in terms of record sales and the visual aspect of it. But now 25 years later, after the success, like I said earlier, now you need 7 of them. Now you need 7 of them to replicate what 4 of them used to be able to do. And it's a shame because instead of their producers and management tapping into the individual gifts to go ahead to deal with the legacy, the long-term aspect of it. But remember, they're kids. They ain't got no Otis Williams like the Temptations are saying, hey, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. We're going to put you out. They don't have that. They're young people. So they got older people that's driving their careers. You can say the same situation maybe with an Xscape or with an SWV. And that dynamic, you see the conflict. I've seen the first reality show with SWV, and I'm seeing, you know, Coco, all respect to her, but you see Coco, and then it's the other 2, and you see Coco, she's kind of holding the group hostage because she's the lead singer, so a lot of the energy is like going her way. She's controlling because they can't do it without her. So I've seen Lily and Taj be upset because it's like she's the one. She's the one that's actually just pulling the strings because, again, the way everything was set up, she had the main power in the group.
So
you know,
and
whatever
that was
it is
always
now, I don't know.
Yeah, but that was always my biggest thing about why I didn't like SWV back in the day was I just felt that when you have one person being a lead singer and the backup, you create a Diana Ross and Supremes and she can move away, or you can create Beyonce and Destiny's Child and they can just move away.
But she did move away and it didn't work.
Yeah, or you create a Kenny Green and a Kenny Green and intro, and he's not there, then the group falls apart. So that was the one thing I liked about Blackstreet, where there wasn't a lead singer, so they could move around, and as long as Teddy was there, somebody could sing, and compared to an Aaron, I think when Coco has later said that she suffers with bipolar, and anyone who understands bipolar knows that it is a disorder that you go up and down. That 1 minute you could be the sweetest person, then the next minute you can be like the Incredible Hulk. And you tend to have medication that helps you try and balance that out. Because when you have one of those days, you can just, if you think of a thin line between love and hate, that Whitfield, the lady, when she was just going,
yeah,
that kind of when somebody's out there, that's bipolar. So that's actually what it's like.
You know, that make a lot of sense. I never knew that about her. But the first time I ever met Coco, we were at Kelly did a song and it ended up on the Princess Diana soundtrack. It was called Every Nation, and he had like every group that was hot at that time. It was like either the end of 96, beginning of 97. It was us, 112, SWV. Curtis Mayfield was there. Before he passed away, he was in a wheelchair in the video that we shot. I don't know if the video ever came out, but he was there. And Coco came up to me. We met them for the first time, and I got photo album where, as though I always try to take pictures. I'm a big fan of everybody. So I went to ask to take a picture with her and her group and everything. And I don't know where Taj was at, because I don't remember meeting Taj to this day, but I met Lily and she was hella cool. But I walked up to Coco and she was like, you sing that song April Showers on y'all album. I said, yes, ma'am. And she said, you got the voice of an angel. He's like, I don't know about you. I don't look nothing like the way how you sound. I was like, damn, I'm kind of fucked up. You know, like, you don't look nothing like how you sound. Like, I look that bad. Granted, at that time, I was going through some stuff and I was looking a little off, but I like some things you think, but you don't say. But then the second time I spoke to her, she was married to our drummer at the time, Big Mike Clemens. Well, he wasn't our drummer anymore, but he produced on our record, so we were cool. So when I did my gospel project, I had spoken to her around the time that she did her gospel project. And she was so cool. She was like, I was like, man, I'm so happy you're doing gospel now. She's like, yeah, I'm following in your footsteps, you know? I was like, dang, she nice to me now. So it's like, it was night and day. The first time I met her, she was telling me how ugly I was. And then the second time, she's like, yeah, I'm following your footsteps doing the gospel music. So that makes a lot of sense. It almost made me look at her a little differently.
But you know, another thing
that's
too,
a main lady, yo.
But another thing too is this: time humbles people. I don't
true.
know her. Time will humble you, because when you're like on top and you're having the success and you have the notoriety, sometimes, man, it just affects your mentality in terms of how you deal with other people. Because even though she's paying you a compliment, it's still it's still undermining you. It's still criticism that's actually there. But think about it. It's been 30 years. It's been 30 years. So now the group has kind of come down to earth. So everybody's at the same level. Everybody's a legacy artist. So now what she's doing, she's seeing the value in you, because now she's kind of come down to earth. So for a lot of those people, I definitely understand people had their problems and stuff like that. But you already know that when people are successful, they just have this aura about them, this energy about them, where they come across where it's kind of like when they deal with people, it can be kind of like dismissive. They may not try to be, but it's that energy that's there. But it takes time. It takes time, and then before you know it, they're super humble.
And you know what else it take too? Sometimes, not saying her because I don't know who she be with, but a lot of times these artists, some of these artists got them yes men and yes women around them. And even during the time where they should be humble 30 years later, some people still got them same egos from in the 90s, because they still have one or two people that travel with them, or there's management or security or whatever, that still pump their head up and make them think that it's still the 90s, and they still got them egos. So I just say credit to somebody who did humble down, even, you know, under those circumstances, because some people don't have no money. Some people have other people living in their house with them or have access to them. You be like, yo, why this person always over your house? Why they don't never go home? But truth be told, they be the ones paying the rent and the light bills. And these people still don't be humble. They still be walking around talking like they something special. So
but as I said, because you brought up, Sheldon, the first SWV documentary, and they all had that falling out, and so because Coco has admitted she has bipolar, and knowing, working within mental health, how, I mean, when I was working in inpatients, we people, some women who hadn't been diagnosed on time were admitted were sectioned and into and kept in our wards until they were able to manage and control. So to think that she went around undiagnosed and had to struggle with all of that. So now that she admits it, she knows that she has to have time off when she's going for an episode. So she just disappears and gets herself back on track, and then comes out. The thing is that, unless she tells a story and all the time, you may see her on a reality show or see her in person, and you don't know what version comes out. Now,
but look at that. But look at that, though, is that when you see that, and we could be sensitive to the fact that they have the mental issues and the stuff that she has going on, and you have to respect that, because you should never prejudge people and all of that. But but at the same time, you can't take away from the fact of how her behavior and other artists who have, like, maybe, I won't say similar issues, but certain challenges, how it impacts their group mates. Because it's not a secret. There's a period of time when Lily tried to commit suicide.
Yeah,
she tried to jump out a window. You know what I'm saying? So, but look, but that all comes to the situation within the group. Not saying it's Coco's fault, but when you look at the whole dynamics and the stress it is being in a group and all of that, you can't discount how that could have impacted that. I'm not saying it's the sole reason, but you know, you have those issues. But yeah, you can talk about it now, but back then, you know, you might have had it, but when you were receiving all the notoriety and the attention and all these type of things like that, it wasn't an issue. But what happens is everybody comes down to earth.
Yeah,
and
but
that
then
success. Go ahead.
But then, like Willie, what happens with labels? Because you know, people might start thinking, you know, you sang, jazz sang, but then why was it? It almost became like, you know, Gladys Knight and the Pips with Drew Hill, where it was Cisco and the backup singers. And is that a label decision and management decision to put one in the forefront? But if that is the case, how does it make you feel? Because that's how Lily was like, look, I love Coco. I believe it was one of the best singers out there.
Mhm.
But I thought I could have a moment to shine. And it isn't taking anything from Coco, but it was about why can't people recognize and bless my talent? And so a lot of those, if I used to love VH1's Behind the Music, and a lot of the rock bands will admit, yeah, we hated the fact that he was making all the money because he wrote all the songs, and we didn't realize that that's where you make the money and stuff. And they aired out their differences, resolve things. But for yourself, Woody, you know, you know, you've spoken openly about how you bullied and mistreated. But could you then start to see that I started this thing with Cisco? You know, we came up with the name of everything, but now he's the superstar and we're his backup dancers. And then there's a sense of jealousy in those early days. Like, why has he been given all this stuff before they started, you know, doing what they were doing?
With me, it was my situation, and it's probably not unique because there are probably some other artists that I don't know about. Sheldon probably would know, but it's like with my situation was a little unique. Like I actually started the group back in high school, and we would come every day after school. Me and a group of guys would come and sing and record each other, record ourselves. I had a teacher that used to let us borrow her audio visual equipment and record after school and everything. So what happened was my mom took me out of the group because we weren't singing gospel music. So during the time where I was out of the group, they actually went on and used to do shows and talent shows and stuff like that. And then at some point they met Jazz and he came into the group. So then it became a thing of Cisco and Jazz being like the 1-2 guys to go to or whatever, you know? So then like when they got discovered by the guy who took them, the guy Haq Islam, that took them up to Ireland where we met Hiram Hicks. He basically was married to the idea of Cisco and Jazz being the 1-2 punch. So then at some point, it was another guy in the group that took my place when my mom took me out. So a guy named Chris. And he really didn't sing that much. He was basically in the group, like he held down the harmony, and Chris was like a personality. Like people, they would go in hood neighborhoods and stuff, and they wasn't scared to go there because Chris would handle business or what. So that was his role. So then when they asked me to come back, they was like, if we turn into a gospel group so you could come back, because we really want you back. They knew what I brought to the table, whatever. We want you back in the group. Cisco would call me all the time. Like, would you come back? You think if we became a gospel group that your mother would let you come back or whatever. So I'm thinking I'm coming back to my old spot that I had, which was like, I was one of the primary songwriters. I was probably like the first songwriter because other people would write songs and they'd be like, why y'all always want to sing James songs, which is my real name, and don't want to sing mine. But like I was probably like the principal songwriter and I sung, you know, like it was more like a Boys to Men format where though everybody sung. It wasn't like one lead singer. Everybody sung. Like people might feel this person is the main voice, whatever, Boys to Men, but everybody got a chance. Like on most songs, you'll hear like all four of them or at least three of them. You know, Mike only sung a solo part on probably like one song, but you know, that was his thing. He was the bass man. But Nate, Wanye, and Sean all like alternated on the verses and stuff. So that was like the kind of format that we had. So then when I come back, I'm knowing that I'm coming back. I figure if you became a gospel group just so I would come back, you don't want me just there just to stand in the back. You feel me? And I'm not needing to sing on every song. So it wasn't never like a jealousy thing. Like, I don't need to sing on every song. My thing is, and I started to wear that shirt instead of this one. I have a shirt and I'm an INFJ personality, which means introverted, intuitive, feeling, and judging. And one of our things, I just want to make a difference wherever I am. So it's like if we singing, if I played on the Lakers, I wouldn't. I don't need to be LeBron. As long as I get to touch the ball at some point in the game and I make some points, so I'm cool with being there. But if I'm just on the team, warming the bench, my jersey don't never get no sweat on it. I feel like put me on another team that's not winning any games and let me help them win a couple games, even if we don't win a championship. I just felt inactive. Like, like I just want to feel like I'm contributing. And that was my biggest thing. Like, I don't gotta be on every song. If we got this song and it's going or whatever like that, I'm not gonna say, oh man, that sucked because I'm not on there. Oh man, well, he get to sing all the songs. It's not that. I just wanted at some point to be allowed to showcase what I do well, because what I don't do well is dancing. So it's like if people just know me as the guy that's messing up with dance steps, and then it didn't help that I started the group, and then another guy who wasn't singing, they's like, oh, well, me, you, and Jazz sing, so we got to give him something so people don't wonder why he there. So if you give him my thing, I'm not singing, I'm singing. Y'all know I can sing, but the people don't know because they only hear the singles. And when people only hear the singles, they tend to think even on the songs that's not singles, when they hear it, they don't put two and two together. Well, I remember a song that we did called Without You that we did with Jay Moss. And it was on Cisco. It was supposed to be our first single for our third album, but something happened, so it ended up coming out on Cisco's second album. But people that look at it, if you look at the comments on it on YouTube, people like, I like how Cisco switched his voice up to singing real laid back right there. And then somebody knew, they said, that's not Cisco, that's Woody. And a whole 40 comment thing ensued because nobody knew that was me because they're not used to hearing me sing. So when I do sing, they didn't even know it was me. So that's all I wanted, was just an opportunity that people can know that he's here for a reason and he's just not here, because it is some groups, like we was talking earlier about the Jacksons, where as though everybody was capable of holding their thing down. I just wanted people to know that I'm here. I'm not just here for wall dressing. Coco already told me I ain't had no face of no angel, so let me show y'all I could do something right. Why y'all got me here and I ain't just the homeboy hookup, they're just hanging out. So that was always my thing. It wasn't never a thing of I wanted to be the lead singer, because like as far as like lead singing, stuff goes along with that. Like you got to have a certain charisma, you got to have a certain, so, and I figured that was great for him, because for little guy, because he's a great dancer, and he had his KC impression down pat. So I'm like, let that man do his thing or whatever, but just can I get an ad-lib here there like Raz B on with a girl once, where Raz B said, why? Can I say why or something like that sometime? And then when I do say why, my mom used to say, when we did the song with Foxy Brown, and we did the little parts on there, each one of us had a little hook. And my mom was like, why is it when it comes your turn or Jazz's turn to sing, this guy still got to come up and put his arm around y'all neck or something and let people know you still there? She's like, sir, you 5 feet tall and you got blonde hair. We know you there. You don't always got to be in the camera. So it's just like, just let me have my little 2 seconds. That's all I wanted. My little 2 seconds.
And to piggyback off of what he said, this is the thing is the group element. And see, we're talking about records and we're talking about videos, but it used to be everything he's talking about. Groups have always had a lot of those issues in terms of the presentation and what their roles are and all of that. And we already know if we bring it up into contemporary terms, we see New Edition, right? And they're unique individuals. But if you take that microphone, that microscope, and you put it on a group, you're going to see what Ronnie DeVoe brings to that group in terms of the choreography, because they all dance. And here's the thing people don't understand is that as a natural dancer, so it's one thing you can get out there and you smooth like Ralph and you can jump out front and do whatever you do. But in terms of being able to smoothly execute within a group setting, within the choreography, Ronnie is very fluid. So but see, the thing about it is, because they are they make records, but they are a visual performing group. You can look at that group and you can make that connection, because there are a lot of people who like Ronnie more than they like Ralph or Johnny, whoever it may be, because they see how smooth he is. And there was a period of time before music videos and of course records were out, but the biggest thing was the show, was the concert. So that's where you really saw a group in their true element, because you would have a lead singer, but you would have a guy that would come out. He had the high voice, You had a guy that had the nice baritone, and you had a guy that would get to the microphone and he would do what Michael Bivins now do, talking in the beginning and introduce the singers so everybody had their lane of what they were good at.
Right.
Go back and you watch like Teddy Pendergrass when he was with the Blue Notes or whatever that is, they all dancing, but you see Teddy not dancing in the group because Teddy can't dance. But they made sure that okay, dancing is not his thing, so he's in the middle. So when they do their little choreography, he's just standing there, just moving around or whatever. But it don't matter because the bigger part is the show. So what everybody's good at doing, they're going to execute that, and that's going to be the selling. That's going to be the selling point. So, yeah, but the thing about it is that once music moved away from like the show element, because that's what it was, like with the Gladys Knight and the Pips, they are a visual show. So the Pips are not background dancers; they're singing background vocals, but they are a major part of the show because Gladys Knight can get up there and sing. But when you see them guys sing and do the choreography and all that, so we get them mixed up with the background dancers, like you see. You know, it might be a Chris Brown or a Jody Watley or Janet Jackson. They got the background dancers. These guys are a group. So when you look at Dru Hill, same situation. You got guys with different vocal tones, vocal textures, and all of that. So when you hear it on the record, you're like, wow. But you don't know it's Woody because every time you see the music video or when you see the records, or when the music video specifically, you're always going to think it's Cisco because you know, until you see them on stage. But the emphasis is the music video and the emphasis is in the record. So you don't necessarily really know. And that's the tragedy in terms of like you see a SWV going back to an Xscape, because even though everybody's singing, but you have one primarily lead singer, when they and this is the problem. A lot of those groups, they were record groups, they were studio groups, but they weren't performing groups. So even though what was going on the music video, what's going on the record, but when you hear them sing on stage, you can look and see that, oh, wow, Candy's really good. This one is really good, but you don't know that because everything is like, it's totally different from how it was before. And of course, you already said it before, the producers, they push this, they push that. But back in the days when you had a stage situation, when you had to create a show, everybody had their thing. Or if somebody
did that when we did the live show, we would break it down just like 112. Like we'd do a tribute, each one would do a tribute to one of their favorite artists, and we'd do like one section, we'd break it down in the middle of a song, and then like you said, the fans be like, wow, you can sing, or hey, he does that, or he does that. And then my other biggest thing too was like, as far as the show, I'm like, I'm not a dancer. So I'm like, can I be like how you said Teddy? And I heard the same thing with Jodeci. Why they didn't, how they danced in Gotta Love, and then you ain't see him dancing no more because Devontae wasn't a dancer, just like I'm not a dancer, you know. But these people made concessions and did other things. But with me, I was like, all right, big man is big, so somebody got to keep their shirt on with big man. We know you in shape too, Wood, but somebody got to keep their shirt on with big man. And me and this guy want to take our shirts off, so you should keep yours on with him. All right, now me, you, and Jazz sing, but this guy don't really sing like that. So in order for him not to look bad, Wood, why don't you not sing with him? So I'm making these concessions. I'm not singing. I'm not taking my shirt off and doing things that I could do. But then when I ask, can it be a concession made for me with the dancing? I'm like, hey, let's do it like Mike. Not saying that nothing was wrong with Mike for real, because I don't know if it was or wasn't. But Mike had a cane, so he ain't had to get up there and do stuff. I said, let me come up with a cane. Don't nobody know me. These people don't know me. Let me walk with a cane real cool. Oh, no, we can't do that. You got to dance. All of us got to dance. So I made concessions for everybody else. But when it was time for me with my shortcoming, it was just like, suck it up. You got to do
but they don't understand is that like you who you are. So they're all doing their thing, they're taking their shirt off, and then they go into a different song, and then you come out there, you change the whole energy in the room.
Exactly.
And now it gives you a totally different dynamic. So they're doing what they're doing. Now, let's say you on stage and all they are singing or whatever. And all of a sudden they get done doing what they're doing. The lights go down or whatever. And next thing you know, you're in the middle over there on the stage with the mic, and everything is there, and they're there harmonizing, doing whatever it does. What it does, it gives a whole element to your show, to where people want to come see you again and again. But
and again, even Hawk used to say that. Yeah, he wanted me because back then I was really good at impressions. I'm very rusty now, so it probably would suck if I tried to do it now. but I used to sing Michael Jackson, "You Are Not Alone." And he was like, he used to get me to sing it in the car on the way up to auditions and stuff like that all the time. And then he would be like, why don't we incorporate that in the show? He's like, that's great when Wood does that, man. Like, like y'all guys know how y'all feel about it, but always somebody like, oh no, I don't think that's a good idea. I think we should focus on our songs, and I think we should just focus on the singles that we got out right now.
I'm gonna tell you something. I'm sounding kind of old right now, but I'm gonna give you another. I always go back to the history. There's a group called the Spinners, and they had two singers. One guy was he was Bobby. I forgot his last name, and it was Felipe Wynn. Everybody always thought Felipe Wynn was singing all the songs, but he was not singing all the songs all the way through. The guy Bobby, I forgot his name. He would come in. He had the smooth sound, and Felipe would come in and bring it home, and he had the ad libs, and he would freestyle. And he had that charismatic personality that people like. And on stage, they had a segment in that show where they would sing songs, and he would come out, and his part, he had a part in this show where he would imitate Al Green. He would imitate Otis Redding. He would imitate all the hot singers out at that time. And I got to send you the video.
Yeah, I love to see that.
I got to send you the audio.
Yeah, I love to hear that.
He's imitating all of the singers, and the crowd is losing their mind. But the emphasis is on the show.
Right.
On the show.
Right.
So and then he tried to go solo, and he was like, man. And then when it didn't work out, he was like, man, nobody really cares about me because the group is the thing. So when you look at Jodeci, even though Casey and JoJo are the voices, but it's something about when you see the four of them come together, people just kind of lose their mind. And you talk about in terms about the skill and talent. Devontae don't dance, so they gotta what he got to do? He got to do the whole don't talk. He got to listen. He got to cool. Yeah,
and he wrote all the songs.
Yeah.
And then Dalvin is just like energy personified. Like he just come up there and just so energetic and so hype on the stage that you just, you get into what he's doing. So everybody got something, right? Everybody got something that make it what it is,
But it's something, but it's something about, as I mentioned, with white groups, and a lot of it was the songwriting, and most people not realizing that they made a lot more money after, other than the tour money. Is that then they are able to have a conversation and talk it out, and to some cases, go back on the road a little bit strong because they've been able to air their differences.
But I don't know. Well, Nnamdi.
Yeah, not all the time.
Like there's a group now, a Journey, in the media right now. They got individual bodyguards and security that we don't want to see him. I don't want to see him in my face. And the same dynamic that we have with the black groups. And I didn't mean to cut you off. They have that same dynamic, but you're right. Some of them know how to come together for the business, for the money. But you're right. Sorry about that.
Yeah, but also recognize though that but are Journey touring together despite the friction?
They're touring together, but here it is. They're not touring with their lead singer because their lead singer was like, you know what? He left them like 20 years ago, and he's the one that's affiliated with all the hits.
Right. He got the other guy that sounds just like him.
He's a Filipino guy. He's a Filipino guy. He was doing karaoke imitating Journey, and they got him and they pulled him in the group. So he's been with the group for like about 20 years. But Steve Perry left in the 80s, even though he's the guy that's associated with all the songs. He said, I could never be with them. Yep. There's a group called Styx. You had a guitar player. It's like you started the group with somebody else. Same with Styx. They had two people, and they had two different agendas in terms of the direction they wanted with the group. And they wound up splitting up. But for the most, Bon Jovi, same situation. But in the end, a lot of those groups say, you know what? The bigger thing is we got to go ahead and get the money. Even when you look at the Rolling Stones, it's four of them. Keith and Mick are almost like the main guys. And everybody else, sometimes they've had their issues. But the biggest thing is, you know what? Okay, we know what the fans want to see. Yeah. So what we got to do, we got to go off and do our individual projects. Now, our individual projects might not sell like Rolling Stone stuff, but I'm satisfying my creative ability to go out and do other things. Like if Woody was able to go ahead and do the gospel album, like Michelle did from Destiny's Child, go out, do the gospel album, come back to the group. Yeah, he didn't satisfy his creative space. Now he can get back into the group. Philip Bailey, Falsetto, Earth, Wind, and Fire. Moved out, did some gospel albums, came back to the group.
Yep. But they sabotaged my gospel album. The one who had the influence with the record label convinced them not to release my album. He admitted it to me because I was on contract that I had to come back and do the third album. We in Jamaica recording, and he admitted to me while we was walking along the beach, like, yeah, I'm the one that told him don't let you go, y'all. And I was scared you wasn't going to come back and do this, that, and the third. So it's like even with BBD and them, everybody from New Edition was able to release their project and show everybody, get off their chest what they had to get the gas off their chest. Then he was able to come back and do New Edition again. But this particular ensemble, they didn't want that. Jazz album still never came out. And Jazz got some of the most phenomenal music that I've ever heard. And I've heard and love a lot of music. And his project was never allowed to come out. My project was sabotaged to the point where they told the people, don't allow me to come out with any videos or anything. It came out in stores and wasn't even any press release or anything. Like, the people that got it just happened to see it. And it was just like, oh, okay, it's here.
2 years before COVID, Ralph Tresvant did a segment. It was called it was an all black. It was the network was called All Black. So they did an interview with him. It was like a segment for an hour, and all he talked about was how he sacrificed his individual goals and musical ambitions for the rest of the group. So, and you already saw from the New Edition biopic, the miniseries, is that everything is built around him. And he's like, hey, add him, make it a group situation. He always talked about how in this segment, how he sacrificed. So while everybody was doing their thing, he played the background, or he could have been the main guy, bigger than what he was, but he spread the love around the group. And then when it came time for them, the guys to come back around again, everybody went solo and they all did their individual projects. He felt that in his prime and his peak, he didn't take advantage of what he was supposed to take advantage of.
Right. And Ralph is I met him. I did a play with Ralph before. Him and Christopher Williams and Miss Jackie Clark from the Clark Sisters. We all did a play together. And I could tell from his personality, Ralph is not. He's an unselfish person, and he's secure. Some people are not secure with, though they think, oh, if people hear this person, then they might don't like me no more. Oh, if they see this person do this, then they not going to come to see me no more. Ralph didn't have that about himself, but some people in my outfit seem like that could have been part of the case too. Oh, if they hear him, then they ain't going to love me the same way no more. If they see him do this, then they ain't going to feel the same way about me. So in that way, certain members of us were suppressed and held back. Even with Jazz had a solo project, and the same thing happened. Somebody put out some phone calls. They good with some people in the industry, put out some phone calls to get Jazz's single pulled off of the air when he was getting airplay and stuff like that. Talking about he could have done that with us. Yeah. Some people don't want. They figure if people see, and then the reason why we came back together and did the third album is because the guy from Baltimore, I told you about him before. He was signed to Rodney, a guy named Tony Curtis. And he does very good impressions, but he do the impressions like in the studio. Like how the guy sound like Steve Perry, he can sound just like Little Guy. So he did a song, and him and Jazz is good friends. So him and Jazz did the song, and they asked me to be on it. So then when people heard it, they was like, what, Drill got a new song? And two people from Drill wasn't on it, but it had that same sound. You see what I'm saying? So in order to stop that from happening, somebody put their solo album on hold, their third solo album on hold, and somebody else came back to Baltimore from living somewhere else because they want people to think that they the ones that hold that sound in a capsule. So when that sound was getting ready to come out and they had nothing to do with it, then that's when everybody was ready to play ball. So it's a whole different dynamic.
Yeah. But Nnamdi, you said it though. You said it right before we jump into something else, is that the white groups, they find a way to put it together. With the black groups, they don't necessarily do it because the industry's set up for them to do that.
Yeah. Just as we finished, we do wish, and the reason why this is brought up was because of the Queens of R&B docuseries for Xscape and TLC and SWV, and Woody first-hand experience of what it's like being in a group, and just because we didn't see. The only thing we saw with Drew Hill was the radio station.
They had a reality show on BET Centric.
No, but the radio show where you came out and said you're quitting the group.
Oh, that
wildlife
fake
and air.
thing, man. We said that they wanted
It was
that's what happened. They wanted a reality show. So they asked me because I actually quit the group via email. And on Super Bowl Sunday, I sent them an email because it was a commercial on there from careerbuilder.com and was a heart that was trying to quit their job. A lady was trying to quit a job and the heart jumped out her chest and wrote, I quit, and walked it into the manager. So when I saw that, I sent the email that night. And then the next morning, I got responses back from everybody. And then they asked me to come to the radio station because they were doing the show and then they had Teo already. And they didn't want people to be like, where this guy come from and where's Woody? So they asked me to go to the radio station because Teo was Jazz's artist. And he sung so good that when he went to the label, I think they knew the direction that they was going with music from then on. Whereas though they was really not much about great singing and auto-tune and stuff, they said he sang too good. So they was looking for an outlet for him anyway. So when I left, they put Teo in the group. So they was like, so people won't be like, where this guy come from and what happened to Woody? Well, what are you done with Woody? Then they asked me to come to the station. And then they was like, when I got there, they was like, can you say that on the air, basically what you said in the email? And then they said, yo, please don't hit me for real, but I'm gonna jump in your face and I'm gonna act like I'm ready to fight you or whatever. And they had cameras there and they actually recorded like 2 versions of that. And then it ended up on, like on the radio station. And for years, they told me, don't say anything because I could get the people at the radio station in trouble because they knew what was going on, which is really crazy. It sounds like, don't tell your mother I done this to you because she going to be mad at me and then we going to have to get a divorce or whatever. It's stupid, but I fell for it back. Dumb me fell for it. So I never said anything about it up until the Unsung. And then they included it in the version they showed me. But then when they put it on TV, they said Keith Sweat on the footage now. So he wouldn't allow them to use it with them admitting that that was fake. But I mean, if you look at it, you from Baltimore, you from out this way, brother Sheldon, they ain't had nobody fight in real life. So that was just definitely like a ploy for them to get a reality show. I didn't actually quit the group on air. I quit the group here.
Mm-hmm. And that's going back to full circle. That's like going back to what we started, Nnamdi, with this whole reality series with Xscape and SWV.
Right, that's why I said it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the idea then is just to be able to recognize that it's hard to what we see on TV doesn't say the full picture as to what might have been happening. Resentment built up, jealousy. Candy's going on her channel saying, I was the lead singer on most of our songs, so why should I be jealous of her? And then it's like, but we don't know what it was like day to day all these years, and so we're seeing the explosive part. And as I said, as a TV production company, you want to keep the best parts. So I mean, I hope them well. That there's both for SWV and Xscape, we hope that they wish them well. We just want to celebrate them, and we hope what Chris Rock did say is that Mama taught him not to fight in front of white folks and not being racist and stuff. But it's like you don't want to air all that stuff in public. You want to try and hope and keep as much as you can to have a proper conversation. And when you do have sisters, blood sisters, not like having that kind of fallout and blaming parents, it's a challenge. It's a challenge.
But you know what too? I mean, as much as people, people that make their money on but them type of shows, reality shows, is not going to say nothing that's going to make them not be able to come back on the next show. Me not making no money off nothing like that. I say this, a lot of stuff be WWE too. A lot of people will take situations and act them out and stuff like that and have in mind the whole time, we going to make it like we fight. We going to make it like we hate each other, like how Kanye and 50 and all them used to act like they hated each other.
Yeah.
See who was going to sell the most records on that day. But then afterwards, they come together, holding each other hands up, shaking hands, slapping five. So for all we know, this whole thing could have been fabricated based on knowledge and stuff that people knew about the industry or based on stuff that came out. So we don't know, It could be that's why the best thing to do is keep watching the show, and then we see how it end up, and maybe we could come back and talk about it after the finale come on, and then see who was right or see who was right and who was wrong,
And that's some low frequency stuff, man, because you got two people like that, right? And you got fans, and
Yeah.
he causing the fans to divide and split up, and
That's
the
what it
fans
takes.
got the energy. It's that's low frequency.
It is very low vibrational, but we live in a low vibrational world right now, man. You can go on right now. If he's sitting here talking with sense, but you can go, somebody can go right now and go on another YouTube channel and see somebody shaking their naked butt in the screen and smacking their cheeks. You feel me? That people love low vibration.
Yeah,
You're right.
I mean, yeah, definitely. I mean, but it's, yesterday I posted the top 10, top 10 selling female artists, and everyone said, "Oh, where's Xscape?" And I'm like, well, if they're not here, it means they haven't sold as many records as say SWV or the Pointer Sisters. And they're like, but Sister Sledge, and they're like, man, they're old groups. How come they're still nominated? But it's like, they had TLC at 85 million albums sold, Destiny Child at 70 million, the Supremes at 50 million. People might say Diana Ross and Supremes selling 50 million, but it's like they were pop, they were international, they were dominating the charts. So it's the Pointer Sisters, people, they had songs that were crossing over, so they were selling records. They weren't
They
just
had songs that made commercials. Jump for My Love was like a laundry detergent commercial or something like
they were
that.
doing films.
But I'm gonna tell you, before all of that, in the 70s, they were huge. They won a Grammy for a country song. They sang a country song.
Wow.
Yeah. They were doing gospel, country.
One day the Blues Brothers too.
I don't know that movie. I know Aretha Franklin was on there. I know
I don't
they
remember
were
Aretha, but they could have had
car wash. They were in
car
car wash.
Okay,
they were car wash.
Yeah.
So when you look at that, like Nnamdi's running down the list, right?
Mm-hmm.
But all people got to do is go look at the RIA, Recording Industry Association of America, to look at the numbers. That numbers don't lie. But then he's also giving you history.
Right.
Like Nnamdi said, is that these people were pop phenomenal long before so and so was doing their thing. But what happens is, when we're hearing Xscape, when we're hearing these groups, we're emotionally attached to them, and it seems like they're bigger than what they are.
I'm gonna tell you this. We're on that same point. I work in a corporate place, and it's like as many people that look like us is gonna say something, Drew Hill this, Drew Hill that. He need to get off his whatever and get back with on the Drew Hill train. When I tell you that people that don't look like us only know Little Guy, they don't know nothing about no Drew Hill. If they say like somebody black will come in there and be like, you know who he is? They be like, yeah, that's James. And they be like, you know what he used to do? He used to be in a singing group. And they be like, yeah, what group? And then they'll name the group and they'll start naming songs and stuff. And the only way they get them to know it, like, Little Guy, like, oh, the one that sings the dog song. Oh, you were with him? That's all they know. Only people that know us is people that look like us. So it's like you step outside that world, it's a whole different world. That's the world that I live in.
I got one for you. I was in the classroom one time and people were talking about New Edition. Now, mind you, this is like maybe 2001, 2002. Mm-hmm. And same thing, White Cats. And they're like, oh, Candy Girl?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But that's why your black base is so important. And you need a black platform like Nnamdi to talk about the history, to talk about the personal aspects of it, the humanistic aspect of it, because on the larger perspective, that pop audience who your management was pushing you out to, they're only going to be with you for a hot minute and then they're going to move on. So your main base. So on the average, if Drew Hill is selling maybe 1.5 million, 2 million records, right? Maybe that 500,000, 700,000, that's going to be the audience that's going to stick with you through the duration of your career, and everybody else is just jumping on the bandwagon.
Exactly.
I mean, the reason why Sister Sledge, somebody said they only had 2 hits. We're Family and the Dance, and I said, Sister Sledge, if I've seen, I was fortunate to interview Kathy, but I've seen some of the videos, and she's performing out in Switzerland, and there's over 10,000 white folks jumping and dancing because those songs that they came out with were universal songs. We Are Family and all that stuff was songs
that song get played at ball games and stuff. Wasn't it the anthem for like one of the basketball series? Yeah.
In 1979,
right.
At the time, you had 2 records that were like anthems. You had We Are Family. You had Ain't No Stopping Us Now. So the Pittsburgh Pirates had We Are Family.
Right.
The Philadelphia Phillies had Ain't No Stopping Us Now. But here's the thing. Sister Sledge even write those songs, and those songs it doesn't matter, they're so still huge. But if you talk to a DJ, Sister Sledge had other songs that were popular that were like dance records. They had maybe a couple albums before the We Are Family album. That's the album that cemented their history. But then they had some other songs, some that are not as high profile. But if you were a Sister Sledge fan, you know the entire catalog.
Right.
But think about it, Nnamdi. You put Sister Sledge out there, they could say, well, they only got 2 songs. But you could say the same thing with Xscape. I'm not being disrespectful.
Yeah, because you need an understanding.
Yeah, you go.
Yeah, those. But I mean, I don't any other songs after those 3. I mean, they had some other ones, but not,
But see, when you know the history, you know the context, you can make the comparison. Okay, well, Xscape, who they only got like 3 songs that you know. Sister Sledge, you might know only 2 songs, but they got other ones. So it kind of negates the argument that where you can shut people down with that. But because our people, we're not big, we into what's current, what's contemporary, and we don't know history, and it hurts us because that puts us in a bigger platform to celebrate our artists in terms of their greatness. So when you look at Xscape had chemistry, they had great songs, even though Jermaine Dupri was doing his thing, but they had an appeal. Because think about it, there was a lot of female groups out at that time, but Xscape kind of cut through that. So it's only like when you look at a lot of songs, Ex-Girlfriend and this one and that one, but it's really only about 5 groups in the 90s that you kind of remember from the female side. Maybe a little bit more, but the ones that stand out, it's always going to be SWV, TLC, Xscape in that conversation. When you look at that early to mid 90s, there's some other ones later. Destiny's Child is coming later, but those 3 groups are always going to be in the conversation, even though there's so many. There's Jade, there's Ex-Girlfriend, there's the girl,
Total,
702, Total,
Close. I mean, but to sell albums, because people were buying singles and stuff, but to sell, 25 million albums like the Sister Sledge or 30 million like in Vogue, you need a wide audience to shift up many albums consistently. I mean,
but if you look at somebody now, if you look at somebody now that's looking at Beyonce, right? You talking about Beyonce earlier, and they would think that Beyonce is this bigger artist, but if you go on the RIA charts, Whitney Houston is moving numbers. She's moving more numbers than anybody. Wow. But people think like Whitney Houston, she's pop, she's this, that, and the other, and Beyonce's the man. You go look at like this streaming is okay, but moving physical product, you got 3 of Whitney Houston's albums. They are 10 million copies or more. Toni Braxton, there's a moment in time. Toni Braxton's selling 4, 5, 6 million records. It's nobody. You look at the Beyonce situation, her albums might be platinum, they might be double platinum, and they may be triple over a course of time, couple years. Man, but you're talking about selling 15 million copies in 10 million copies in a year, 8 million copies in a year. Yeah. And then 20 years, 30 years later, now you just sold another 10 million copies. They don't know. These artists, the fans are like they have an emotional connection that these artists are bigger than what they are. They're great, they're talented, but that's why it's good that you put those numbers out there, man. Best selling.
It's selling. And as I said, I've loved Xscape and I love the singles, but I never thought that, because how many of us were buying all those albums and stuff and can name more than just a few singles. SWV were very fortunate. They their first album had those bangers, and they had the ballads across those 3 or 4 albums. But and they're older than Xscape, so they're a different level. But as I said, reality TV, it is the piggyback of WWE. I think I think you love your wrestling, where they hit you with a chair doesn't necessarily mean it's a strong chair, and they already know who's going to win before they finish it. So
they know the end game, and the end game for them might be all of them on that stage together, holding hands and raising each other hands up, and the 2 sisters coming together. That'll be big for everybody, playing with everybody's emotions. So let's just watch it. Let's do another one, man. When the finale come on, and
when it comes on,
But the heat from Xscape came off of they were on some sort of award show.
Yeah,
They
it
were
was
on
just
Soul Train,
they were
Lady
on
of
a
Soul,
recent, I don't know
right?
if it was right. And at that point, that was when the spark kind of like kicked off and they got that momentum, which is good, you know. But you know, going back to SWV, you talk about the first album. I mean, that album is like it's dope. But one thing about what makes SWV unique, even though Coco was the lead singer, they had a great vocal harmony blend. And when you heard them, you could hear them years ago and you hear them now on the new records, and you know that's them. They have a strong sonic identity with how they sing, that blend. So when you got to give them a lot of credit because they didn't get lost in the shuffle with a lot of groups, even though the second album was dope, third album was, Coco talked about shared her feelings about the records, but I'm gonna tell you, man, when you see them together, it's just like it's great. So even though Coco is the lead, but it's something about seeing those three together, and it's just sad, like you said, it turns into WWE with a lot of the problems or whatnot or whatever. It's just unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, as we wrap up, because we've been on the air for let me take a look for it, just over 2 hours. Just as we wrap up, it's been, it's when I interviewed Brian Alexander Morgan, and I asked him to, like, look, I never like seeing just one lead singer. Why is it Coco singing all the songs? And he was, he said, well, her voice was great, and but the harmonies are just as important and stuff like that. I'm not a musician, I'm not a producer, so I'm like, oh, okay, so that makes sense. It was actually Lily actually no, Lily actually saw my interview with Tabitha Duncan from Cut Close and posted, because Tabitha talked about how they got Keith tried to replace her with somebody else because she was very, they were trying to replace her and Levon from Cut Close and bring in somebody new. And then Lily saw that interview and posted, man, the industry is messed up. And it's at that moment that I noticed that, wow, that people are watching, especially people within the industry. But I was also mindful that they do watch when people are talking about them. So when Brian is saying that he's, that's why he only picked Coco, being able to have a conversation with Lily about what she thought about that, and her, in her own words, saying she loves Coco. She was an amazing. She wouldn't put anyone up to Coco. However, it was unfair that she never got a chance to shine. And and at the time, listening to that, listening to Mike and Slim, I couldn't understand it as much until I started to listen to yourself, Woody, and understand how either labels or management or people within the group have a way of not respecting or understanding how to value one another. And everyone just thinks this could end today, so let's just milk it as much as we can, so we keep the formula going and not think about what the impact it has on you or anyone else, and we just
And
go
the
this.
thing about it, let me say one thing.
Yeah.
It's a meme that says toxic is when they can't treat you right, but they can't let you go either. It's like, I was cool with it being that way, and I offered to go home. They begged me to stay. So it's like, why do you want somebody to stay just to sit around and be in a, what you call it, just to sit there and look stupid? But go ahead and continue.
Yeah, no, as I said, it is the kind of stuff where I hope anyone that's watching the SWV Xscape drama are able to understand that these things have happened across most of our groups. And it's probably why there's a falling out. One of the reasons people might be asking me, my favorite all-time musician and our producer, outside of Michael Jackson, was Teddy Riley. How come you haven't been able to get him on Halftime Chat? Teddy Riley used to follow me on IG, and he used to, we used to communicate and like, yeah, let's get you on the show. I had no idea he had a falling out with Blackstreet, and I had no idea. So when Black Street were planning to come to England, this was, I think, 2021, I posted a video with them singing maybe No Diggity or something like that. And I said, yeah, I can't wait to see my boys in town in a week's time. And he unfollowed me, and then that was it. Like, nope, I'm not that. And so I didn't understand that. But then a few weeks later, his Uncensored comes out, and he just grips Chauncey and stuff. And I'm like, oh, so here I am celebrating Chauncey and the rest of the guys, not knowing that you're seeing that and you're thinking, oh, so you don't realize, because I had no idea that there was a beef and all that stuff. So, it's most when we don't know what's happening in the background, we just see what's in front of us, and right. So I'm able to sort of just hope that they don't use this stuff. They need to get the juicy stuff to get people to watch and to sell airspace and stuff. Mm-hmm. But I just hope, Angie Stone said it, that unfortunately we thought as Black women we were going to have a platform to promote ourselves as R&B singers. Instead, they turned us into a catfight just to make, to boost the ratings, to compare it with Love and Real Wives of Hollywood and Love and Hip Hop. They wanted that type of audience, so they turned the creators and producers turned it into that, and created an environment.
Is on one of them shows too, so that wouldn't be so far fetched.
But the tragedy is, it's kind of, you can kind of see it, look at it both ways, because they sometimes Black groups value Black entertainers, especially contemporary Black entertainers. Their value is based on how many records they're sold and their popularity, but their talent and their legacy and their impact, it kind of is less celebrated, less appreciated. So that means that if you're not selling all these records, then people are looking at you like you're not successful, even though you've made an impact. Fans have bought your records. You go to shows, you can sell out shows, but then the people in the public's mind, you've just fallen off, you've just gone somewhere.
Yeah.
So, and unfortunately, when you have a platform to be on television, instead of celebrating individuals' legacy as who they are as singing, as singer-songwriters, as a group, that aspect of it, you always see the lowest common denominator being celebrated. But on the white side, they always show these groups, they present them in a whole different situation, to where it's not necessarily perfect, but they make sure their legacy is always at the forefront, and they don't do anything to tarnish the brand. But on the flip side, you got to look at the audience, because the audience is conditioned to where if they were watching the Xscape, SWV, and they're focusing on, okay, we want to make an album together, we want to do these tours, and that's what's going on with this show they got. A lot of fans be like, you know what, that's boring to me, I don't want to watch that.
That's when people love that low vibrational. We said it earlier.
Yeah. They want to see. Yeah, they want to see. They wait for Coco to scratch somebody with some nails or whatever. You know what I mean? Just whole different type of crazy things. And it's sad, but they're plugged into that. Instead of saying, here's two groups that was out in the 90s, relatively the same age, came out at the same time. Now we're trying to go ahead and we're trying to restart our reignite our career. You know what I'm saying? But it's always got to be a slant, the drama.
Right.
That's when you get Black. Go ahead.
I mean, think about if they had a reality show with Bruce Springsteen and Billy Joel. Now, if they can come out with an album now and combine the two of them, won't sell more than 20,000 albums, but they're still signed to major record labels. Bruce Springsteen, what's the guy? Bob Dylan. They're still signed for life. Barbra Streisand, they're still signed to major labels. They've not released anything. They're not selling anything, but they're still considered icons. Like, yeah, you need to keep a Bob Dylan on your label because he or Bruce Springsteen, because they're living
their legacy. They're legacy artists.
Yeah, but where's Lionel Richie? Lionel Richie's outsold all of them combined, but he's still not signed to Motown. They're not saying, yeah, well, anytime you want to put anything up, we'll release you. you know.
But when you look at like legacy artists, you can put Elton John and Billy Joel. They toured together. They put them on tour together. They play the pianos and do what they do, and they going all over the world, man. And they selling out arenas and all of that. But there's a lot of things that come along with it. Like you used the Lionel Richie example. Well, Motown was an independent label, and even though Motown had a lot of great artists, when I say it was independent, they never were tied to like major labels as far as business. So what happened was the bigger they got was great, but they couldn't compete with the bigger labels. So they couldn't come out when the videos were really popular. They just couldn't compete because they didn't have the budget. So Barry Gordy was paying for everything out of his pocket. So he was going bankrupt. He was losing money. So he had to sell the label because he just couldn't compete because the music industry had grown. But like you said, from an emotional standpoint, it makes sense for us to see Lionel Richie with Motown. It's a sentimental value that we have and all of that. But unfortunately, you're going to have certain groups. Even Lionel Richie went through it. Oh, you're pop. You're making these soft records. But now you almost have to wait that out because he went through that like in the 80s and 90s. He's soft music. But I went to a Lionel Richie concert at a music festival in New Orleans. And he went out there and he ran through his whole catalog for about an hour and a half. And people was losing their minds. So it's like sometimes you have to wait out the criticism and all of that for people to kind of catch up to you. And then they realize when they see you on an award show and they seeing you run them songs out, you forget how good this person was. And that's a tragedy where with us as fans, we have to go through that whole stage to forget how big somebody was. Even when you look at a Michael Jackson, is that there's a period of time, a lot of people, they love Michael Jackson, but there was a lot of Black people that criticized Michael Jackson. They criticized him a lot. But it was like,
especially during the bad time, I think is when he I think the Remember the Time won him back over to the bass. They got celebrated with the bass and he did Soul Train, did NAACP, he did everything, and that became his holding bar. Where we didn't turn our back on him again, even when he got kicked out by everyone else.
See, Whitney Houston is another one example. Is that she comes out, but I understand the response because at the time when she's making those records and they started to become pop, you see George Michael coming out with Faith. That's like a Black record. And all of a sudden, all these white groups coming out from England, and they're making Black music, making Black classic music, but the Black people can't get no shine. The Black artists can't get the shine, even though you got imitators of their group. Phil Collins said a lot of records he's imitating the Jacksons. Some of his singing, he's imitating Michael Jackson. Which once again,
recently they want Black music, but they don't want it from us.
Phil Collins recently. So that's when you see Michael Jackson, going back to what we were saying before, how great he was. When you got somebody like a Phil Collins taking your albums, studying your albums, and he's singing the ballads, and his instrumentation is like Michael Jackson's records. It is what it is, man. But I think the younger the audience gets, they're so far removed from the history that they don't know. Because even though you got the internet with so much information at your fingertips, people they're more uninformed as ever. You know what I mean? They're more uninformed as ever. I don't get it, but it is what it is.
I just said it. We sitting here talking knowledge, but somebody is watching somebody smacking some cheeks or watching somebody do stupid pranks on each other and stuff like that. So just because the information is there, don't mean they feed. What they say, you can lead a horse to the water, but you can't make them drink. You can lead a person to information, but you can't make them think. Some people just love foolishness. And they don't want to hear nothing that's talking sense or showing them nothing with sense.
And that's why your platform is so important, because
very important.
After people get caught up in all the sensationalism and they see your platform, they realize this is the real thing. That's why people are coming to see you, man.
Yep.
Yeah. But also a lot of people enjoy hearing. I mean, we've got a number, Diamond Onyx and Noper. Extractor. There's a number of people who are tuning in and watching and listening and actually do enjoy hearing these kind of conversations about the music and about the people and about the things behind the scenes, because it's you know, what we get mostly is the drama. What we get mostly is what pulls us down, and we don't get enough stuff that lifts up the community, lifts up the culture, and celebrates. You know, we have Rolling Stone magazine saying Michael Jackson's listed at number 986, but then they forget all the stuff he did with the Jackson Fives and the Jacksons and his pre-Thriller stuff, and they think of his latter days, and so there's no rebuttal.
Yeah, you hit it right on the head. We have no media platforms that counter that.
Yeah, right. You know, they've taken the Cosby Show off the air, regardless of what has happened with Bill Cosby. The show itself put, you know, it was a way of seeing black communities. Like, you know, who's, you know, wouldn't it have been great if you had a parent who was a lawyer and another parent who was a doctor.
Yep.
And then you're sending your kids to college and you're dealing with all the dramas of grandparents and stuff. And you weren't having, you know, they'd rather have us keep watching Good Times and being stuck into that, or Martin. But like the Cosby Show, that elevates the community and elevates where you are and says you can achieve this stuff.
Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing is that when the Cosby Show, it was so foreign, and we got to be careful. Because even though Good Times and the other show that you said, it was the total opposite. We gotta always make sure that those shows in the proper perspective as far as what they meant to the culture and what they did to set up the Cosby Show. Because keep in mind, when the Cosby Show, now everybody loves it. But I remember when the Cosby Show was out, and there were black people were saying, "Man, that's a show trying to be a white show. Don't nobody live like that."
Are you serious?
Yeah, I remember that. They were looking at that show. They were like, because they seen a 2-parent household. They seen them. They had to, because at that time during the 80s, you know, a lot of people were looking at shows. Some people loved it, but there was a segment of people who were criticizing it, like that's not real life. Black people don't live like that. I'm not talking white people saying this. There were black people saying that they don't necessarily live like this. But the dope thing about it wasn't related, because you know why? Because one, obviously, they grew up. There wasn't a lot of black shows on TV, first of all, and the ones you might have had in the back of your mind, like you said, it would have been a Good Times where everything was all, the seriousness. They was dealing with the poverty and everything else like that.
Yeah.
So now you see in this show, but here's the dope thing that people won't miss about the Cosby Show is the show was just it was a black show, and it was a nuclear family. The man and the woman, they were professional. Kids went to school, but here's one of the things that Bill Cosby did. When you look in the house they lived in, the house was surrounded by black art, right? Then when you brought the grandparents and the grandmother in, the grandmother and they were connected to the history. The father was like a jazz singer, so it was always connected with the black culture. And then people who he knew that were guests on the show, he would make sure you have a broad scope of the whole black experience with guests who were coming on the show. They would come in, and then you would see the segment that everybody loves. He's playing the Ray Charles record on the stereo, and the family's singing to the Ray Charles record. They got the sunglasses on. He's giving you the whole spectrum of, he's giving you the visual, he's giving you the auditory, he's giving you the historical component of black culture. But he's able to do that because at the time he's doing the Cosby Show, he's in his 50s. So he soaked up 50 years of black culture he's injecting into the show. But a lot of us, we didn't catch on to that later. We were drawn into the characters. But he raised the element of people to where a lot of people who never thought about going to college, they wanted to go to college after seeing the Cosby Show. You see people running around with the Hillman t-shirt. It's a reference to the HBCU situation. Bill Cosby, man, he gets a lot of credit for that. In terms of, there's like this myth, he tried to buy NBC and this is what they did. You know, I really don't believe that. I know he tried to buy it, but he tried to buy that 40 years ago. But I just think that in terms of like with our entertainers, our heroes, you know, there's a time where they elevate you, and there's a time that they throw you away, and whatever issues that you had in your life or whatever, those things will surface and come back. Because if you look at what's happening with Bill Cosby, everything started with that one black comedian that said what he said. And after that, boom, they took it and they ran with it, and everybody's coming out the woodwork.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
I've seen situations with Michael Jackson. I won't say any names, but there's one person, one prominent person who's a pro-black figure, pro-black leader who defends Michael Jackson. I remember reading in a newspaper article in 1983, 1984, this same person who defends Michael Jackson, when he was going through all those issues, he said that Michael Jackson, I won't say his name, but he said that Michael Jackson is not the example for young black men to emulate. He said this. He said this in 1984. Because at that time, Michael Jackson had the curl, he had the light voice or whatever. And he was like, he just said he wasn't a role model for black men to emulate. But later on, this same person wound up defending Michael Jackson when Michael Jackson was going through all those issues. But he had to wake up and realize that Michael Jackson was more than what his opinion of what Michael Jackson was at that time. So we got to be very careful when we're that's why legacy is important, to being able to really break that stuff down, because Michael Jackson is doing something and he's in a pocket where nobody's doing it. Keep in mind, remember, Michael Jackson is 25 years old, 24, 25 years old. What 25 and 24, 25-year-old now do we see creating at the forefront of a lot of these things? Think about what we were doing at 24 and 25 years old and the level of success that he's dealing with. Think about Michael Jackson at 10, 15 years old dealing with the level of success. Then you shift it back over to the SWVs and the Xscapes. They're like 19, 20, 21, 22 years old, and they're dealing with this unprecedented success. Then you're dealing with the dynamics, 3 different dynamics, 4 different dynamics trying to come together. So whatever problems or issues they have on their own, they're bringing the energy into that group. And then there are other issues that drop down, and now they got to deal with those issues. So when you look at that, you almost got to we see it, but we got to look at, okay, what was I like at 21? Because think about it, you're dealing with insecurities within a group. You're dealing with jealousy. You're dealing with people pulling strings and divide and conquer and all of that. So at 20 years old, who's able to survive that? Who had 20, 21 years old has the mentality of trying to survive that? Chris Brown, we talked about Chris Brown situation with Rihanna. He's like, man, people can't live that. They can't live that down. I made a mistake or whatever that is. You know, hey man.
Yeah. Just as we wrap up with it, I guess, you know, the reflective question I wanted to ask is that if Dru Hill was still the group that you started before your mom took you out, and the way the situation was set up before you left and came back, do you think you guys could have been a bigger group if it was set up where everyone respected everyone's role and responsibility, and you weren't sidelined, but you were leading as you were before you left? Do you think your group could have been even bigger?
I think so, because like Sheldon said, it was so many elements that the people didn't get to see. And the sad part about it is now people are seeing those elements because they follow each one of us on social media or whatever. They see the different personalities and things like that. And it's like, for people to be able to see that together, I think it would have been a lot bigger than what it ended up being. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And so guys, that's the, as we leave it like that, you know, we started off talking about Michael and celebrating him. I mean, it's good that Sheldon was able to bring it back to Michael and yeah, but also I think one of the things that we've tried to say, even with the SWV and Xscape stuff, is that you know, Chris Rock, you know, as much as he said, you know, joked around with the whole Will Smith slap and Oscar stuff, how he ended it was really important. That as a community, we've only got ourselves. The one thing I've always admired about the Jewish communities, that they lift themselves up, they support themselves.
True.
If you are part of that community, doors open for you within that community. And you know, it is, you know, not that they don't have differences, but in general, they work it out within the community. They and because they've been through so much. we've been, as a Black community, we've been through more than any other community in history.
Yes, sir.
And unfortunately, we still don't seem to be working together to lift ourselves up. We're more likely to continue to tear ourselves down. And even when one of us gets singled out, instead of being like a flock who goes around and protects the one that's been kicked out, we'll probably say, yeah, you can have that one. We don't want that one. So, and then we all move away. And other communities will say, nope, if they're going down, we're all going down. And that's how we should start earning respect. I'm not saying, I look at someone like an R. Kelly, and he's been accused and he's been convicted of what he has been. But everyone is now banning the music, banning everything, and saying, "Yep, he's this, he's that." But on the flip side, Harvey Weinstein's films are still being watched, shown, and celebrated. No one has any issues with that. People still celebrate. What's the guy who does the Wall of Sound? Phil Spector. He's still, he's still respected and everywhere. The other artists, both musicians and filmmakers and stuff that are non-Black, that have gone through jail and everything. Marv Albert went to prison for stuff, came back out, still got his job back, and no one thinks twice about it. So there's the double standards, but it takes a community to protect the community. And so I'm not saying that we allow bad things to happen, but we try and protect the legacy and the culture, because if we don't, no one else will. That's definitely sure. And you guys have been gracious to talk about what I've been doing on Halftime Chat, but that's been all about celebrating people's lives, the culture, giving a space, a safe space for people to share their story, as Woody has been as a guest, and not use that to twist it around. And it may not always be the most popular thing to do, but it's surely a way of trying to set a standard for all other people to try and do the same thing. Is that we should just understand that not just life is short, but as a community we've gone through so much, and that's my whole sole purpose right now is just to elevate the culture, the community around the world. So I thank both yourself, Woody and Sheldon, for joining me on this quest and being and so self-support, having the space for us to chat as frequently as we can. I thank you guys who have been tuning in and commenting. It's been real support. But as I said, having both of you guys on board it's a real blessing, because we all have very different perspectives and come from different angles and stuff. So guys, we're going to think about what we're going to talk about next. It was divided when we celebrated our top favorite female artists and male artists. We didn't realize that we left a few people out, like Tina Marie and stuff. So, so we're gonna have an opportunity to be able to come back and do that. But thank you guys. It is about midnight here. And we're 7 hours. Our clocks haven't turned until next weekend and stuff.
Oh,
but,
okay.
Yeah, our clocks haven't turned and stuff. But yeah. Any final words, Woody and Sheldon, before?
Hey, man, thank you once again. And like Sheldon said, man, your platform is so important. Like I've done interviews with other people and not to discredit them. And some of them were good, but then some of them made me even appreciate you that much more, because you actually allow somebody to talk and you allow somebody to tell their story, and you don't try to tell them what happened and didn't happen and you wasn't there. You feel me? So it's just like, I just appreciate your style and the way that you interview. And like friends of mine that watch the interviews and stuff, they say, I like when you talk to they call you their friend and you never even met. I like when you talk to my friend from overseas. I like when you talk to my friend from the UK. Because he he lets you talk and he understands and he. it's just the way you are as a person, as a human being, you know, and it shows through in your work. And then when I can be included with Brother Sheldon, man, it's like this guy knows history. You know, like I can say something and I can allude to it a little bit. He'll tell you exact that was in 1975 on May the 3rd. You know, so we got a built-in fact checker right here, man. So it's just like to be amongst guys such as yourselves, like, and to call you guys my friends and my contemporaries means the world to me. So I'm grateful for both of you guys, man, and thank the Heavenly Father for the opportunity to be on here with guys such as yourselves, for real.
I second that. Nnamdi, is the big one I see with you is one word is genuine.
Mm-hmm.
Genuine, 2 words, genuine and integrity.
Mm-hmm.
So when I see you engage with the artists or whatnot, it's coming from a very honest place. And even when they talk, you're not steering them to the dysfunction. You let them go ahead and express themselves, and you ask certain questions. And then you also you remind me of like you were like a talk show host from many years ago back in the day, that when they were talking, they made sure that they weren't focused on the low vibrational stuff.
Right.
You focused on the essence of who they are, what made them great, and all of that. And if they wanted to share something, you would allow them to do it. So I think, man, all those artists you need to talk to, they need to send you a check, because you're like a therapist, you know. But that's your wheelhouse anyway. So that's how I see it. And I see my man Woody. I see that's that Briggs and Myers personality joint you got right there. Yeah,
yes,
I see that.
I met a lady and she worked in career, and she said that on their dating profiles and stuff, they have to include that. They have to include that so people can know if they're a perfect match. And I think it's like more accurate than even horoscopes, because you can't help when you're born, but when you take that test and you show like how your personality is, and somebody else take that test and you able to look at both of them together and see if y'all a match or whatever. Yeah, man, I'm really into that.
Yeah, but as I say, guys,
including me. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. As I said, you don't understand how it. It's how important it is for me to be able to have people like yourselves that I can talk to, rely on, and stuff, because it's a full-time job. I've got a family. I'm still in grad school, and so and then sometimes in the job I'm interviewing and I'm hearing these amazing things, but I don't have a voice. And halftime chat is not a place for me to have a voice. It's not for me to give my opinion. I listen to what everyone says, and if an artist says we invented hip hop, it's not for me to say no, I don't think so. I'm like, oh, okay, wow. So having the space like this to have a voice is with you guys, it's therapy for me. It's a space where I can just say whatever I say the little I want to say, little, and just have an opinion and do that. That's why I really enjoy this space and encourage and celebrate them and stuff. So I appreciate you guys. And
you the podcast Quincy Jones. You know Quincy Jones. Let them just sit back and let them do their thing. You're the podcast Quincy, man. You know.
yeah, definitely. But anyway, I thank you guys. So it's 0071 here. We've and so I appreciate everyone who's tuned in. And until next time, guys. We'll be back and stuff.
Okay. Everybody take care.
I know.